Oh, and I have a thumbs up, but I just want to make sure that everybody's online who's checked in and appropriately. All right. The City of San Marino appreciates your attendance, whether in person or virtually, and citizens' interests provide the council with valuable information regarding the issues in the community. Regular meetings are held. Oh, I guess I can take this off now, and maybe you can hear me better online. Regular meetings are held the second Wednesday of the month and the last Friday. In compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, any person who has a disability who requires a modification or accommodation in order to participate in this meeting should contact the city clerk's office. Pursuant to Executive Order N-29-20, members of the City Council may teleconference into the meeting, but today we have everybody here. So, coronavirus, we also have an advisory as a precaution to both staff, our constituents, and elected officials. The city is asking members of the public to always follow State Health Department's guidance on large gatherings when deciding whether to attend this meeting. In that regard, all seating in the council chamber space 6 feet apart to minimize close contact, and shaking hands and other contact is actively discouraged. Although public access to the meeting in person is allowed, if you're sick or identify yourself to be higher risk, you're encouraged to watch or listen from home or provide input electronically. Members of the public may observe and offer comment at this meeting, telephonically or otherwise, and we'll explain in further detail to help the residents understand how to our process as we proceed. If you're an individual and would like to participate, there are 3 ways you can participate in the meeting: from home, via computer for video streaming, and that's on our Zoom website as you see in the agenda; via phone for audio only, and the phone number is also posted in our agenda; and also submit public comments as well via emails to cityclerk@cityofsanmarino.org. So I'd like everybody to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes, good morning, Council. Before I do a roll call, I would just point out that we're joined today by Amanda Merlo, who on Monday will be taking over as Acting Community Engagement Manager when Amanda Fowler begins her maternity leave. Baby is coming, not here yet, but we anticipate that happening soon. So welcome back to Amanda. And I will be handling roll call duties and calling of the roll today. So Councilmember Huang.
Here.
Councilmember Jacobowski. Here. Councilmember Chal.
Here.
Vice Mayor Eady.
Here.
And Mayor Shepherd-Rami.
Here. The special meeting agenda was posted 24 hours prior to the meeting at locations at City Hall, the Kroll Public Library, the Rec Department. Also, it was posted online to the city's website, cityofsanmarino.org. To ensure that everyone, including those joining us remotely, are able to hear all speakers clearly, please speak directly into the microphone whenever you're addressing or speaking at this meeting. Public comments, as I said before, are accepted via email. And if you would like to email a public comment on an agenda item to be read into the record, you can do so by emailing cityclerk@cityofsanmarino.org either now or when the specific agenda item comes up. And we will accept these comments from those also joining us on Zoom. We have staff facilitating this meeting and the internet for internet users and callers to ensure that everybody can participate. And we thank you for your patience as we continue to navigate through this process and ensure the greatest amount of public comments at our meetings. I would like now to ask our acting city clerk, Amanda Marlowe, and welcome back, to explain how the public comment will work on the individual agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So we just wanted to take a minute to go over with everyone how each of the ways you can comment works. So first, we will take in-person comments for each item. So if you'd like to speak and are here in person, please fill out a speaker card, which is out there in the lobby next to the agendas. And you can turn it in to me when you want to speak on that item. Secondly, we'll also accept comments via email sent to cityclerk@cityofsanmarino.org, and that email address is also found on the agenda. So these notes will then be read into the record. But also please note that we must receive these emails before the public comment period for that particular item ends. The comment may be summarized if necessary to limit it to under 3 minutes. We will then ask for comments from our Zoom participants. When we ask for public comments via Zoom, there are 2 ways you can let us know you would like to speak. First, you can use the raise hand feature, which is found by clicking on participants and then clicking on raise hand, which is on the bottom right side of the screen. This will alert us that you would like to speak. But please don't use that feature until we've asked for public comment, or else we may not see it or know which item you're asking to speak on. As a second option, you can also send a typed message via the chat box saying you would like to speak on this particular agenda item. Comments will be accepted only until the end of public comment period for that item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The city welcomes public input, and members of public may address City Council by completing a public comment card and giving it to the city clerk prior to the meeting. At this time, the public may address. Pursuant to state law, the City Council may not discuss or take actions on issues not on the meeting agenda. That's Government Code Section 54954.2. The mayor also reserves the right to place time limits on the duration of comments, and staff may be asked to follow up on such items. Do we have anybody present here today that wishes to speak on the items? I don't see anybody here. Could you please check first if we have any calls or Zoom? If anybody has raised a hand?
We do not have anyone on Zoom. Oh, excuse me. We do. One moment.
Thank you. We'll wait a moment until we access that person and we can take the comment. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Romani, you can go ahead with your public comment.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Romani. I live in Oak Knoll, San Marino. In the attachments to the staff report, you see details about correspondence between me and the San Gabriel senior planner for the Metro bus system.
Dr. Romani, can I
Yes.
just interrupt for a second? We're not on any of the agenda items. We're taking public comment that has to do with items or concerns that are not reflected in the agenda. So I don't know if you're speaking, because I don't know what
Thank you.
attachments.
I made a mistake. Thank you. I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have any other public comments of a general nature about items that are not listed on the agenda here today?
There are no email comments and no other Zoom participants wanting to speak.
Okay, so let's give everybody on Zoom one more minute to see if they raise their hands, just to make sure.
I think we're good.
All right, thank you very much. I wanted to take just a moment as a personal point of privilege as the mayor, just to thank and give my sincerest thanks to our residents, our local business owners, and our city staff for continuing to remain vigilant in this tough time and really handling the stress beautifully and protecting each other and our community members. I appreciate everybody's cooperation greatly, and I hope that everybody stays safe and well. And also, I know that we have experienced some losses in our community, and we share and have great sympathy and share your sorrow and loss. It's hard to be away from friends, especially in times of grief. But I hope that you know that your community supports you at this time, whether we need to do it virtually or not. And I appreciate the efforts, even if it's a note or small gestures that we're giving to one another at this time. And finally, I wanted to congratulate the Huntington Middle School graduates, as well as Valentine and Carver. I had the pleasure of going by the ceremonies and seeing teachers, parents, everybody just acting so wonderfully and celebrating those moments for our children. So I really thank the community and the leadership of our own staff to make those things happen, as well as the families and PTA and the kids themselves. Congrats, it was wonderful, and I'm glad we had a celebration and we were able to do that. So our first item of new business is support for the Metro Next Gen Transit Plan eliminating bus route 258, Oak Knoll, parenthetical, through San Marino, Parks and Public Works, and the city engineer. Can I have the presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The item before you is an opportunity for the council to comment on certain elements of Metro's Next Gen bus transit proposal that impacts San Marino. Simply put, Metro is considering eliminating Route 258, which travels from Pasadena through San Marino on North Oak Knoll Avenue. Metro is also considering eliminating Route 79, which is the east-west bus route on Huntington Drive, although they have indicated to me that they are reconsidering this discontinuation based on comments they have received from current ridership. Metro says that if they keep Route 79 instead of discontinuing it, they will change its frequency from 20 minutes to 30 minutes and make it a more direct connection to rail transit stations to the east and west. Included with your agenda packet are maps of each route, a brief description of Metro's goal for their route changes, correspondence from Metro representatives regarding ridership levels on the existing Route 79, and comment letters received from local residents. The action before you is to review the bus routes and at your pleasure modify or otherwise edit the draft comment letter included in your packet. Comments are due to Metro by Monday. This concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Director Throne. Do we have any questions from council members first? Council Member Talt?
I have no questions, thank you.
Council Member Wong?
No question, thank you.
Council Member Jacobowski?
Yes, so thank you, Director Throne. So what is today is the elimination of Huntington, although they are considering putting it back, correct?
That is correct.
So then our wording on our letter, although it is brief, strongly supports the realignment of 258, but it is silent to Huntington Drive?
That is correct. We had originally proposed to have you support the elimination of Route 79 through the city. However, Metro, in discussing this with Metro, they said that they're leaning toward keeping Route 79 with a different number, with different ends to it. So at this point, the council could either support their existing proposal, which would be eliminate both bus routes, or stay silent on Route 79, or what would be called the Route 179, and support that, or do anything in between. But they're definitely sticking with the elimination of Route 258. They don't have ridership on it. They've got better uses for their buses. In discussing this with them, they still have a lot of really, for them, strong ridership on Huntington Drive within the 8 stops in San Marino. And from their rider feedback through numerous public workshops they've had, they would like to keep that route, change its frequency so that there's more headway between it, so there's less buses running, but there's still enough service.
Thank you, I really appreciate that.
And just to clarify, the original letter that I drafted did have both, and the staff removed number 79 and reprinted the same letter with that dropped off. That's what your agenda packet is today. Thank you. Vice Mayor Udi?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions as well. I would like to open this up for public comments. I know that nobody is here, but I believe we had a community member who wished to speak on this, or at least one, there may be more this morning. So can we please check both Zoom and audio and the email system to make sure? And we can start with a public comment or questions.
Sure. Mr. Romani, excuse me, Dr. Romani, if you're ready, you can go ahead.
I am ready. In the attachment to the staff report, you see details about correspondence between me and the San Gabriel senior planner for the Metro bus system. A few months ago, Stephanie Johnson and I went to a Metro workshop. This was held in different sites to solicit public's input. At that time, we met with the planners and had a good idea of what is going on at Metro. New, energetic, sophisticated group replaced the old guards. There is an existing, published draft proposal made by the new Metro staff in order to deliver more efficient services to the community by eliminating lines that are badly or hardly used by riders and creating more frequent services at the same time. The City Council was planning to submit a letter supporting an existing proposal by Metro NextGen, which would remove the Metro bus from Oakland Drive Avenue and from Huntington Drive. Then, about 15 people complained about the bus from the Huntington Drive. 15 people only. Now, after these 15 complaints, Metro is looking at different proposals for Huntington Drive. No official alternative has been published by Metro yet. The problem is as simple as this. We need to continue to send a letter supporting the initial published Metro draft. Then, if and when the new proposal becomes officially published by Metro about the Huntington Drive, we can address it then. That is if and when it happens. It would be an inaccurate and premature procedure to comment on something that other organizations are just discussing at this point. We need to stay the course and send our supporting letter to Metro for what is officially published in the current draft. When and they officially publish another draft, then they will be soliciting comments, and then we can comment on what they publish. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Romani. Do we have other public comments, either through Zoom, an email by city clerk?
While they are checking, Mayor, did you want to, sorry.
Where's the voice coming from? Sorry.
Did you want
This
to
is
have
Stephanie
the
Johnson.
3 minutes?
This is, hello?
Hello,
This is
Mrs.
Stephanie
Johnson.
Just, are
And
you,
I submitted a public comment via email. I don't know if you're going to put those in the meeting now, but I would just say that I agree with what Dr. Romani has just explained, that I think it's not appropriate for the city to comment at this time over potential changes to the next gen plan. The public comment that Metro now is receiving is about their published plan. So I think Dr. Romani explained everything well, and I would just support that. I would also add that in talking with residents in town with regard to the subject matter of eliminating the buses, that people are in favor of it. I haven't heard anyone who has said that they wouldn't like the buses removed. So I would agree with the letter, the draft form of the letter from the previous meeting earlier this month, and that would be the letter that would be appropriate to send to Metro. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And we do not have, just so you know, I don't know if you want to read your email into the record, we do not have it in our packet.
Yeah, we do.
You do.
it was distributed this morning, but
Yes, I have it now. Thank you, sorry about that. This will be made part of the record then? And I appreciate it. We do have it in front of us. Thank you. Do we have other comments from the public, either by Zoom or by email?
I have 3 emails which were distributed to you this morning. Ms. Johnson and Dr. Romani's emails align with their comments they just made. And I do have one additional email from Mr. Salro, which I can read into the record if you'd like.
Do you want to read them all, or they'll just become part of the record?
I can summarize them for time purposes.
Thank you.
The email from Mr. Saul Rowe is against eliminating all bus service in San Marino, and if there is an elimination, then alternatives should be found. To summarize Ms. Johnson's email, she is in favor of the plan as outlined by Metro, and Dr. Romani is also in favor of sending the letter of support supporting the initial draft by Metro. And there were no email comments received during this public comment period.
Thank you very much. And one more check of any Zoom comments or people who have raised their hands that wish to be acknowledged at this time?
No further Zoom comments.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'll bring the matter back to council for discussion. Are there any other comments? Council Member Jacobowski?
We're beginning discussion? Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate the fact that Metro has done these studies throughout their service area. For a long time, many of us have passed buses with hardly any people on them. And I am particularly pleased about the suggestion with the north-south route on Oak Knoll, in that any of us who have gone down that narrow street while sharing it with a bus always feel that anxiety of getting pretty tight in there. But it's further justified by the ridership. In commenting on Huntington Drive, I apologize again for making my comments about being out and about in the early morning, but I love observing what's going on in our city. And I must say, many times when I do pass the bus stops, I see people, usually women, coming off the buses, many times with bags or whatever. My belief is that these may be people who are working in homes in this city. I see this often. And I do have a concern about that transportation issue. It would be impossible for me to speculate if this were something that was eliminated, if their employers would ensure them getting to where they need to be. But I can say that I feel currently this route performs a service for some homes in town. With that, I am fine with either keeping the letter as is, in staying silent on Huntington Drive, or if it is the will of the group, to consider supporting the continuation. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Wong?
I'm in support of the initial letter, as maybe it's a time for us to cancel the service of 79, just like a long time ago when we stopped the train service in the city. Of course, I feel sorry for those people who use this service, but as Council Jacobowski, as Member Jacobowski said, we don't really see a lot of people using this massive transit. So I think that it's probably a good idea for them to use the bus elsewhere, and probably less pollution for us. Besides, in our city, we have the dial bus ride. So, I think that would be convenient enough for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Talt?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, in response to one of the requests or one of the emails, there is an alternative. San Marino does have a dial ride program for people 60 years and older, people at any age with a disability. So there is an alternative if they do in fact decide to cut off 79. I think at this moment we should probably be silent about 79, and I fully support the removal of the other line, because when I look through the package of information, the communications that Metro's had with Dr. Romani and Stephanie Johnson and the city, they clearly have not made up their mind, and they're going to come out with another proposal. But I do want to warn people that we're not just talking about people in San Marino that ride 79. 79 is a route that carries has a ridership of over 1,000 each way. And if they change it down to the new line that was part of the original proposal, those people will complain. So for San Marino's purposes, I would love to cut off the use of 79. It doesn't look that the ridership is that big in town. I do concern myself about the students who use it, but without actual numbers, it's hard to assess that. And that's why I think that we should be quiet about it at this point and see what they come up with. So I would use the letter that is presently in the package.
Vice Mayor Udi?
No, I support what Councilmember Tolt was saying. I think it makes sense to eliminate the north-south and to be silent on the east-west at this point.
Thank you. I am in support of the prior letter. I think it's important for our community to eliminate things that bring congestion, particularly by the school sites, because as many of you know, on Huntington Drive is the route that passes by all of our schools and brings traffic pollution and more congestion. And we already have issues about traffic safety in those areas, and to eliminate those bus stops that do not serve the school children, I think would be a huge benefit to our community, particularly along Huntington throughout. And also the buses, we do have the dial-a-ride service, and as you all know, times are different. We have Uber, Lyft, and other things. And the closeness for residents who do want to use buses is fairly easy to even walk or ride a scooter or proceed to San Gabriel, whether it's Garfield, whether it's California, or down on Mission. We're all within a half a mile or less, every home, I believe, of access to a very major and frequently running bus. So I do have a problem with this. My totals of numbers are 500 each way, and when you pull out the stops along Huntington on an average weekday, they pick up about 40 and drop off 69, and similar numbers. It's not till you get to Santa Anita Racetrack and the hospital and the mall and the Gold Line where the numbers pick up, but those again are not ones in San Marino. And if we look at the proposal changes, there could be a lot of ways that people could get to those places on the surrounding buses. So I think it's premature to comment on anything that's not presently before us. I feel strongly that it's a benefit to eliminate the lines for our community and our environment, especially given the extremely low numbers that actually get on and off the bus here in San Marino. So if we have any other one wishes to speak or a motion on this?
Well, I have a question because you raised an interesting point. What exactly is before us? Is it the original, the next gen business plan as including the elimination of 79, or has that part of the decision been taken off the table?
Metro's indicated to me that the proposal to eliminate both lines is still their proposal. However, when they go to their board in June, they are seriously considering changing their Route 79 proposal to this Route 179 proposal. But they won't have that developed until after the public comment period is concluded, which occurs this weekend.
So then the mayor is absolutely correct. If we believe that we should object to the continuation of 79 or to the plan to eliminate 79, then this would be our opportunity.
Right, and that was my thought, is we need to act on what's before us, and there still may be changes to. We don't know what Metro's going to do. We have an inkling because of Director Throne's contacts, which I appreciate keeping us informed, but I think it would be premature to actually act on that or to remain silent, because it does benefit our community in the long run as well as a greater community really, to eliminate 79 and have better bus service elsewhere for the reasons I think council members and public and myself tried to summarize. So that was why I was saying the original letter with the addition of just simple words, Route 79, Huntington Drive, and Route 58 would be the appropriate position to take at this time. And once we get another proposal from Metro concerning Huntington Drive, then it would be appropriate to look at that.
So council, if I might just add to your discussion, you could either stay silent on it, you could support the elimination of 79, or not support the elimination of Route 79.
Thank you.
So your choices are one of those three, I would suspect.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments from council members?
Mayor, your proposal is to add in strongly supports the realignment of Route 258, parentheses, Altadena-Paramount, and Route 79?
Correct, as stated in the original draft. I don't have it with me, but it was in the agenda packet for the last meeting, and it's just adding those words. Thank you. Do we have a motion at this time from any council member? Okay, then I will so move to revise the attachment with the language that city manager just read.
If you read the motion directly from the agenda, it indicates as revised and amended by the city council, and that would then include your addition.
Okay, I move to authorize myself to submit a letter as revised and amended by city council to include Route 79 to Metro, indicating the city's support for discontinuing bus transit lines 258 and 79 in San Marino. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
You don't need a roll call, but I'm
Okay.
going to do it if you'd like.
All in favor, it's not a financial. All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed?
Opposed, I'd like to stay silent on 79 at this point.
All right, thank you very much,
Thank you.
council. The motion passes by a vote of 4 to 1.
Thank you, council.
Sorry. Next, we have the presentation of fiscal year 2020-21 proposed budget by department operational expenditures, the finance. Recommendations, staff recommend, don't need to read that. We have it.
Not yet.
So I know that Director Chung will be giving us a presentation leading off, and he also has put together slides, a PowerPoint that will be shown on our Zoom platform at this time.
Madam Mayor, I actually will be starting the staff report for you today.
I apologize.
No problem at all. I will be very excited to turn it over to Finance Director Chung in a few minutes. Just a couple of housekeeping items first, just so that you are aware, Senior Counsel Lynch is with us just on Zoom this morning, so we are not city attorney-less, in case you were concerned about that. Also, for the people that are joining us on Zoom, I feel like I should just acknowledge the women's room sign above my head. I did try to match it today, so I hope we can not be distracted by that, but that is our optics this morning. That is not indicative of our presentation to you. We are indeed here to talk about the budget. This is our third year together working through the budget process, and our third finance director sitting next to me. I'm very pleased to have Finance Director Chung with us. It's the first time that we've had a permanent partner finance director with us, and I'm very excited about the changes and improvements that he's made to the budget process this year, and look forward to working with him for many years to come. We are in a good position today, bringing you the budget presentation. The last few years have been, I will use the word challenging. We have spent a lot of time trying to understand our budget process. The 5 of you, along with staff, getting used to working together on this process. We've had many long meetings where we've discussed every aspect of this budget, and I appreciate all of your engagement. I think all of that work has brought us to this point where we have a clean budget to present to you. Not that it hasn't been clean in the past, but I think we all understand where we're starting from. We have been working very closely with our budget liaisons. As you will recall, after all of our first budget year together a couple of years ago, we thought it might be helpful to redesign the process a bit with some feedback from the City Council. So the Council did appoint 2 budget liaisons, Vice Mayor Udi and Councilmember Jacobowski. This is their second year continuing in that role. It has been extremely helpful to have consistency in that role and to have the support and partnership of the 2 council members. We really appreciate how much time you've spent with us over the last 2 years trying to put together a process that is helpful and productive and transparent and wieldy. I want to assure the council that the two liaisons have, in our favorite colloquial term, gone very far into the weeds with the budget this year. They have picked it up, looked at it every different way, looked into every expenditure, asked quite a lot of questions, and I would like to say have gotten a lot of answers as well. I think they feel very comfortable before you with the budget that we're proposing. We've made some minor adjustments to the process this year. I hope it has gone a little bit smoother for you, both in terms of what we're presenting to you and when, and we appreciate their help on that front as well. Their passion and interest in budget issues is surprising to me. I am learning very much from both our finance director and our liaisons, and I appreciate their interest in working with us. And so before I go a little bit further, I just want to give the liaisons a brief chance to say anything they'd like to say. Vice Mayor Udi, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I appreciate working with Director Chung. It's been refreshing. I want to remind all of us with the expenses of the city, our biggest expense is personnel. So we've already decided that. Our second biggest bucket is capital improvements, which is next week's discussion. The third biggest is our priority initiatives, because most of those priority initiatives generate operating expenses. So in this year, it's a couple $100,000 worth of increases that are conscious decisions that we've made to better the city. And then the fourth bucket is what we're going to talk about today, which is supplies and contract services, which is much, much smaller. And there's less flexibility and wiggle room in there. And yes, this is the third time we've worked together as a council on the budget. And if you recall, the first year, we went really into the weeds, line by line, looking to justify every expense. And we got them justified, but we lacked the context of the operating metrics and what we were getting for the money we were spending. So last year, we added the context of what each individual department does during the year, and that those expenses support what they do to help better the city. So this year, we had the benefit of having last year's operating metrics, prior year operating metrics, and then projecting this year what this next year, what our forecast for activities is going to be, and the expenses then to justify that. So when we have that contextual foundation, then we can go to looking at variances. We don't need to justify each individual line, but we can go looking for variances in the activity and variances in the expenses. So when we look at these line items, each line item has a schedule. And I went through each line item and each schedule behind the line items and developed a schedule for myself where I was looking for variances. So I looked for variances greater than $2,500 or 15%. And in looking at that, that generated some questions for me. So then I gave Director Chung, I think it was 3 pages of bullet line questions, and I got 7 pages of answers back. So I feel like our process is really, moving forward nicely, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of years as we continue to refine this process with the goal really to eliminate surprises. Financial surprises are usually bad surprises. So I'm pleased we're here where we are today.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Jacobowski, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I just wanted to underline, it was helpful for me to remind myself when I was looking at some of these supplies and contract services, yes, these are priority initiatives. That's why they are there. I concur with Vice Mayor Udi in that I really did spend a full weekend going through the entire budget and passed along my questions. So I feel comfortable and confident that everything, at least I had been concerned about, has been answered.
I was going to say, you're not on camera, so it might be helpful if you make your comments and we have you, because we all can hear you, but I know it's easier if it's directly covered through the camera.
So the audio feeds directly into Zoom separately from the camera. So
okay.
we will,
of course,
we will just pretend that the Vice Mayor was ventriloquism. The camera did remain in name. Apologies to
our council member Jacobowski would like to address the public. I think now is a great time because you've done so much work in this regard, and state your comments again. It's up to you.
So are you saying they were lost or?
No, they were heard, but they got to see Vice Mayor's lovely face while you were
Oh,
talking.
and it's fine looking at his face. That's it. Thank you. All set.
Okay. Thank you very much again to liaison. So just to continue with the staff report, today we are in meeting 1 of 2, as the Vice Mayor indicated. Oh, sure, now you get the camera on me. Can't you put it on Councilmember Jacobowski for this? All right, we are in meeting 1 of 2 of our proposed budget process. And the second meeting will be occurring next Friday, as you know, on June 5th. So we are offering you the proposed budget for almost all of our departments today. And this generally means expenditures only. So today you'll be seeing all of the budgets of expenditures for each of the departments, but of course that's not the complete picture. So as Finance Director Chung walks you through his presentation, he's going to begin with a discussion of revenue so that you know how to set the stage for the expenditures that you'll be seeing today. What you have in front of you today are all departments other than community services. We have saved the community services budget because of course that has some significant restructuring as a result of the recreation re-envisioning. That will be on your agenda for next week, as well as the CIP discussion. Of course, you had the majority of the CIP discussion previously. These are just the items that are remaining for you to consider. And so those are pended to next week. Final budget adoption is scheduled for our regular June Friday meeting, which is June 26th, which will have budget adoption in time for the end of our fiscal year as is appropriate. So today is your opportunity for any final questions. We appreciate that many of you, all of you in fact, have submitted questions prior to today and given us a chance to answer them. And we appreciate that. So today is the day for any final questions and any changes that you'd like to direct into these department operating budgets. To take a slight detour away from the numbers, I would just like to brag for a moment. The city has accomplished a lot over the last year. It has been a very busy year, and we had to do a very significant pivot, as every other city, of course, has had to do with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. The accomplishments of each department are in your budget document. They are on either the first or second page of each department. There are many bullet points for each department. I encourage you to read through them carefully if you haven't already. I am very impressed with everything that the departments have accomplished. Just a few of the highlights are we significantly improved our website and outreach activities. Of course, as you know, we have launched a robust economic development program, which we had never done in the city previously. We, of course, managed a municipal election. We switched banking, which resulted in significant financial impacts in a positive sense to us, which was fantastic. We completed the labor meet and confer process with all of our employees, which I assure you is no small thing. The beautiful Rose Arbor is just applying its final touches and in fact is almost complete. Fire impeccably has led our COVID-19 response efforts in addition to everything else that they are doing. And police reduced burglaries by 22%, which exceeded their goal of reducing it by 10%, and reduced traffic collisions by 13%, which again surpassed their goal, which was to reduce them by 5%. So those are just some of the highlights. We have been very busy. We've been working as best as we can to serve this community that we all are committed to. And again, I'm very proud. But turning to numbers, which is why we're here today, of course. The Finance Director will be setting the stage for you momentarily, going through his presentation, which you have hard copies of in front of you as well, and our Zoom listeners will have the opportunity to follow along as the Director gives his presentation. We've agreed that he's going to give you the full picture of projected revenue and expenditures, which will then result in giving you a heads up about what our excess is expected to be. But a word about the excess. Keep in mind, this is not profit. This is the money that we use to transfer to our capital budget to fund our critical infrastructure needs. So it isn't just extra money that we're sitting on, it's money that we're using to do important things for the community. And if that amount did go away, we would indeed need to find some alternate ways to finance our infrastructure needs. The good news is that overall, not only are our expenditures well within our revenue in general, but as the Finance Director will walk you through, as you see the full picture, our expenditures are actually going up at a lower rate than our revenues are going up, which is exactly what you'd want to see, and he'll walk you through that as we do that. So today I'm about to turn it over to Finance Director Chung. He'll start by taking you through the first part of this PowerPoint presentation, which is a high-level discussion of the finance framework of the city that you can use to consider the budgets you're going to look at today. We'll stop at that point and ask for any questions about that high-level discussion, and then the Finance Director will go through his overall presentation of every department. We're going to ask that you hold your questions and let the Finance Director get through the whole presentation, and he's essentially going to explain the major changes, as Vice Mayor Udi kind of took the words out of my mouth. What we've tried to do for you today in this PowerPoint is explain the major variances. So if a department's budget is going up by $15,000, we're trying to explain to you what the major cost drivers are of that $15,000 in the presentation that the Finance Director will be walking you through. And once he completes that, I'll finish up with some very brief comments, much briefer than the ones I've just given, and then we will turn it over to the council for your questions and comments. So without any further ado, Finance Director Chung, take it away.
Great, thank you, City Manager. City Manager's taken a lot of my presentation notes, so I'm not going to go into my original presentation notes, my intro, but I do want to thank the executive team, the direction from the City Manager in regards to this journey. A budget is a journey, especially when you're first time looking into the budget for the city. It gave me an opportunity to get into the deep in the weeds. That's part of my job, to get into the weeds, and so I've had emails to the directors at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. I mean, I've asked their feedback in regards to all the various budget increases, decreases, and whatnot. So I just wanted to say thank you for those directions. Also wanted to thank the budget finance liaisons for their directions as well. It helped the process, and I believe third year in, I've learned quite a bit, but I believe I've taken a lot of notes to make this process even better next year. So I'm looking forward to this year, but also next year as well. So let me get into the numbers, as that's what we are here for. I'm happy to report to the City Council that we have a balanced budget. For our revenues, we're looking at $29.9 million. On the expenditure side, we're looking at $26.8 million. And this is focused on the general fund group, meaning that includes the general fund, public safety, 4th of July, San Marino, donations, workers' compensation,
Can you make sure that the public sees the document that you're reading from?
I just realized.
Thanks, that would be helpful. Especially as now we've said it a couple times, so they're probably eager to see the numbers like this. Thank you.
I'm having difficulty with my remote. It was working earlier. It is not connecting. Jacob, can you help me out here? Okay, now it's working. Perfect.
Thank you, Director Chung.
My apologies for the Zoom members. Let me go back 1 minute here in my presentation. So let me start with the revenues again. It's $29.9 million next year. And on the expenditures, it'll be $26.8 million. And that'll get us a remaining cash of $3.1 million. The city manager had mentioned that cash is transferred to the CIP next year per council's direction. The general fund group, as I was mentioning, includes general fund, public safety fund, the San Marino Center, 4th of July, workers' comp, the general liability, and also the debt service as well. Without great services, we need the revenues to back our expenditures. So I want to cover the revenues. The revenues for next year is anticipated to increase by $353,000 or 1.2%. This is a very conservative projection for next year, as we are still in the COVID-19 environment. We are still in a economic recovery. So I wanted to be very prudent in projecting out next year. The main driver, as you're aware, is our property tax, which is close to 70% of our general fund, which equates to $19.8 million. The remaining sources of revenue is other revenues, which constitutes franchise fees, business taxes, investment income, fines, and miscellaneous revenues. And that's about $4.4 million. And then charges for service at 8%, utility users tax at 6%, license and permits at 2%, and the remaining 2% or a little less than 2% is our sales tax. We are in a very fortunate, fiscally fortunate situation, being that a lot of the local cities that you've heard are in some economic crisis, being that when their driver is a sales tax is their main proponent of their taxes or their revenues, it really hurts them, especially in this current environment. But for us, being that we are mainly driven by property tax, and so far property tax has been intact, and it's projected into next year to be still intact. So for property tax, I've projected a 4% increase for next year. But on investment income, I did half that revenue from, it's not a lot of revenue. This year we're anticipated to earn $350,000, but next year I am basically cutting that in half, being that, as you know, the yields are nearing 0%. So our overall, we're anticipating our yield to be about 1% return on our investments. We are going to see a little uptick in charges for services, and that's mainly driven by recreational fees, which is going to be discussed next week, but that pushes because of the resident, but mostly the non-resident fees that they're proposing to increase next year. Moving on to expenditures. Overall expenditures next year is going to increase $283,000 or 1.1%. As the city manager has mentioned, it is less than the overall revenues that will increase. And the overall, the increase is mainly due to as the vice mayor has mentioned, it's really broken down into personnel. Personnel is 73% of our operating budget, and that's really driven by contractual increases, the MOUs and our CalPERS. The service and supplies is about 25% of our budget, and that includes, of course, the priority initiatives, the various CPI increases for utilities and fees, contractual agreements, and also equipment cost allocation, a fancy way to say depreciation for any equipment that we purchase over $5,000. That's actually anticipated to decrease next year as well, being that some of the items have been fully depreciated. So you'll see a little decrease in various line items throughout the departments. Overall, as I mentioned, our expenditures next year are due to decrease or increase less than our revenues. And I want to hone in on the service and supplies, as Vice Mayor had mentioned, that this is the line item, the $172,000, where the council can direct staff to have the discretion to either decrease the proposed line item. And in this expenditure also includes the police vehicle leases. And if council today decides to fund and purchase it through CIP, that will be a decrease of $113,000 for next year. So that will actually bring our expenditure increase overall less than 1% for next year. I'm sorry, my clicker is not working. Sorry. The last slide I have for you is just I wanted to show the council the historic cash balance. As I mentioned, the cash balance isn't really net profit, but in a sense, cash that will be transferred to the CIP to fund infrastructure. And as you can see, I went back to 2014, 15, and see the overall growth. The growth line the revenue growth line is on top of the blue line. The expenditures is the orange line below. And then the overall bottom line, the gray line, is the actual cash. So basically the net between the revenues and expenditures. And you can see that in fiscal year 19-20 that we're currently in, we're estimated to end the year approximately $4.2 million. And next year it'll be close to 3.1. And as I mentioned, I want to highlight that the reason for that decrease is really driven by the revenues, as I expressed that this is a very conservative revenue estimate for next year. That really concludes my first segment. Before I go into department budgets, I wanted to open up for any questions the council might have for me for the 6 slides that I just presented.
Thank you very much, Director Chang. I know I have just a couple questions. So if we want to go down, Councilmember Wong, do you have any questions on the presentation of the sort of summary tables?
No, I don't have any questions. I just want to thank the budget liaisons and then, the finance department.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacobowski?
No questions? Thank you.
Councilmember Talt?
Yes, I do. If you could, first of all, I would like to thank also the budget liaisons and the department heads for doing the hard work here. I always look at these budgets as an opportunity to understand even better what we do as a city and the services that we provide. And I'm kind of a weed guy, as we all know, so I will at times dive in the weeds. However, the way it's been laid out this year helps me better understand without necessarily asking questions and jumping into the weeds. But if you go back to that last slide, the historic cash balance. Last year, what you're anticipating was a 24.9 million in expenditures. And that was based upon a budget, I believe it was, the proposed expenditures were 26.5 million. Where did we find those about $1.5 million savings throughout the year?
I just wanted to make sure I understand the question. When you're referring to the $24.9 million, you're referring to the 1920 estimated actual column?
Yeah, that was the estimated actual, but if I go back and take a look at what the budget as amended was, we had a operating proposed expenditures of 26.52. Now, I didn't go back and look at last year's budget to confirm that, but there were savings throughout the years of I'm not very good at math, 1.4 million. Where did that $1.4 million come from?
That should be mainly driven by if you add in the workers' comp, general liability, debt service, that's where you see that increase there.
Well, no, I'm talking about, if I take a look at 2019-20, we had budgeted expenditures at 26.5 million. What this diagram is showing me is that what we're actually going to spend is 24.9 million. Okay, now that makes me very happy because obviously we came under budget, but I want to know where you believe those savings came from, and I'll tell you why. Is because a lot of times we just go back and take a look at the previous year's budget, and we either accept it and just pass it through. But yet, if we're getting savings in there, I want to know why, so we don't get into a big argument over whether zero-based budgeting is appropriate and so forth. So where did those savings come from, and have those savings been built in to this year's budget?
And I apologize, I fully understand the question now. So regards to, yes, the $26.5 million expenditure budget and the reflection of what we anticipate to end is 24.9 million. And it's really two main drivers. Main driver is the operational savings, meaning there are some expenditures on, and that are also related to COVID-19 expenditures that we are not spending this year as well. So overall, the departments have submitted their year-end estimates to me, and after reviewing that, that's what we came down to, that we're going to save versus the budget, a $1.1 million savings.
Okay.
And to answer your question, so how does it reflect to the following year? We took that into consideration because there are one-time budgets that are no longer going to carry over to next year. And so that's why you'll see that increase, but not a bigger increase, being that there are one-time budgets that are no longer carrying over. Hopefully that answers your question.
Mostly, yes.
May I add, Councilmember?
If you may.
Sure. Thank you so much. As Director Chung indicated, the majority of these quote-unquote savings are resulting from COVID-19. So there were a number of things that didn't get expended as a result. So one of the things that you may have noticed is one of those line items that is near and dear to my heart related to staff development. Many of those funds didn't get expended because in the beginning stages of the pandemic, everybody just canceled conferences and trainings and that sort of thing. What we're seeing on that front is that virtual events are starting to come back, and so we did not do an overall reduction to the budget because that really was a one-time savings as a result of those cancellations. One of the biggest drivers, though, really is recreation. We canceled our recreation programming, and so we had no expenditures that were related to that. There will still probably be some level of cancellation in the next fiscal year, but as I think we're all seeing, things are opening up perhaps a little faster than we might have suspected, and so there might not actually be as many cancellations as we thought. So we didn't build that into the budget because there's so much uncertainty about that.
Okay. Now, I understand and I appreciate it. Thank you.
My apologies, I wasn't clear.
Just to follow on your point, because I'm a little confused, having canceled, or what you just said, City Manager, that we canceled recreation programming during this COVID, but the largest expense of that is really our personnel, and they've been reallocated and performing city services to our residents in different ways. So that might account for some of it, but probably not anywhere near 1.1 million because they have been participating in the emergency center, as we know, and other things. So I just want to clarify, I would think that's a modest savings because we've been lucky enough to have their services in other ways to support our residents.
So sure, just to expand on that, I would say there are a variety of things that are related to the cancellations for COVID. Those two are only two of the ones that I highlighted, but recreation is a significant driver. We did in fact have the opportunity to redeploy many of our part-time staff to other uses exactly as you've described, Mayor, our resident hotline. We have people working in other areas of the city, but there are several part-time staff people that we didn't repurpose at their choice. And so there are still savings there, and the program costs are largely driven by personnel, but not exclusively driven by personnel. So there are multiple cancellations related to COVID, and then there's just other expenditures that we didn't get a chance to make over the course of the year, as kind of happens each year.
All right, and Councilmember Talt, did you have further questions based upon this opening summaries?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Udi?
Yeah, Councilmember Toll, when I was doing my schedule, I did look at prior year budget as well as estimated actual for this year end when I was building my schedule against the proposed budget. So I was very aware that not to copy and paste last year's budget to this year's proposal. And then Director Chung, you were very conservative on your revenue estimate. If the glass were half full, what would you have for your revenue estimate?
If the glass was half full, I would say we would probably see another, at least a 1% increase, which of course at a $29 million, that's quite a bit of an increase.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, because I too, as Councilmember Toll, you always get concerned when you see your excess cash line going down, and if one of the main drivers for that is, you know, a more cautious revenue projection. I was just trying to see what that might look like, so thank you.
No problem.
First, I wanted to thank all of our executive team, particularly Director Chung, for working around the clock recently, or maybe always, but we won't acknowledge that, but definitely recently to respond to all of the questions and put together both this document, which I think is very, very helpful for the community and for all of us, as well as answer some of the weedy questions that perhaps we have, or provide us information. So I know it took a lot of work from our executive leadership, our city manager, and Director Chung, and I really want to acknowledge the amount of time because it's a great effort, and I do think as well I need to thank both of our liaisons for this project. It is so much better, I think, than we all showed up with, and I know it's taken months of time and effort on your part to really give the overview and get this to be a document that's useful for all of us, and it's a huge amount of work and a vast improvement. And I know, again, working with leadership, our Director Marlowe and Director Chung, this is wonderful compared to what we had, and I really appreciate it, done in so many different ways, and I appreciate all of your work. I know it's been a burdensome job, but it came out beautiful, if I would say, this year. And it's so much clearer, and we can look at these numbers and get both big picture and small picture. So I really appreciate that effort. It is huge. I do have a couple questions. So I just want to quickly go over this. I am referring to the proposed expenditure slide that you first presented, and in this slide it talks about a 2.7 change in service and supplies, and I was just interested to know how or why it's different than what was in the staff report, which is on page 3, where we have service and supplies basically higher at 4%, because when I first looked at that, was not, you know, in the staff report, there's a summary and they're both at well, they're at 6.3 and 6.6 respectively, and there are different numbers in this. So I just wanted to get an update as to whether there are different things included between the staff report numbers and these, and what they are. I had not compared them directly.
Yes, and so going back to that question in regards to what is the difference, if we go back to the previous slide, on here, this number, if you look at the top, it goes general fund and public safety fund. On the staff report, that's what I reflected for the staff report at the time, which gets you to the, if you look at the proposed fiscal year 2021, the 24.880078, that should tie to your staff report that was presented to you. And so if you, the reason that that wasn't the whole picture, meaning there's other expenditure funds that needs to be part of the whole general fund picture, meaning the funds below that, the 4th of July, the San Marino Center, and the various other funds below that. Now, if you see that the main driver the reason I did not include that on the staff report, it's not to be non-transparent, it's more to give you a truer picture, at least if you're looking at the general fund and public safety only, because there's this debt service. As you can see at the bottom line, you see that decreased debt service of $503,000.
It's significant.
That really brings that number down. And that's because it's close to maturity, and next year the principal and interest is due to decrease quite a bit. And I wanted to show the council that on a general fund and public safety fund, just those two fund levels, you're at 3.2% increase. But you have to look at it holistically when you take into consideration all the various other remaining general fund items. Your expenditure is only growing at $283,000 or 1.1%. To kind of answer your question in regards to what's the difference between the personnel, I'm including it should be nominal, meaning a small change, but the changes are really because of the various other funds listed here, as I mentioned, that kind of changes your personnel and service and supplies, or mainly the service and supplies, but it shouldn't be a big swing.
Right, but I was just saying 4% to me seemed larger, and pretty significant what was published in the staff report. But so here I'm understanding that you're at 2.7, and then when you take into account that debt service, it drops to a 1% increase, or 1.1.
Exactly.
And the debt servicing then is one time reflected as a loss because our next year interest rates or what have you will have to be changed. Is that my understanding?
No, so regards to debt service, it's in our debt schedule, in our bond indenture.
Oh, correct.
Basically, it's already set for the term of the period. So we're nearing our maturity, meaning we have 4 more years after next year. 3 more years after next year. So that schedule is already set. And mainly the principal is dropping about $300,000 next year. And that's why it's not really anything in regards to the yields.
Okay. And will that be, just so I understand, for the next few years then, that assumption will be on an ongoing basis of a drop?
No. So regards to the next 4 years for the debt service, it should be in line with what it is next year. Meaning we are budgeting for debt service, hold on, I think it's close to. So you see how we're budgeting $513,000 for next year? That number is pretty much going to stay that until it matures. So you won't see a big decrease.
So it will continue to decrease, but it will stay at the decreased level. It won't come back.
Oh, yes.
That
you're not
was what
you're not going to see an increase. It's going to stay relatively at $513,000 until maturity.
Okay, so we will be budgeting then in future years,
Yes.
basically around approximately that same amount.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to point out, and thank our residents as well, and those who voted for the public safety parcel tax number, that it is a significant sum that we are able to pay almost all of our police and fire. I believe it covers there, and you could reflect that, or we could discuss that in later portions when we focus on that community, or those two departments specifically. But by looking at it, it ended up to be covering almost everything but about $200,000 from each when we talk about the public safety fund and how it supports our police and fire department. So I wanted to thank residents and acknowledge that it's a significant amount in our budget. And I'm glad that the council, we recently decided to keep it the same, but it does provide a lot of relief for very important public safety. So I thank the residents for supporting that measure again, and I see it reflected appropriately this year. So that was a wonderful point that I wanted to make for the community that really does make a significant difference, and this entire budget would be vastly affected. And we would actually end up not having a balanced budget this year, but a negative. So I appreciate the public support in that regard, and I wanted to point that out, and thank you for also keeping it separate so that we can see it in these line items. All right, is there, do we have any public comments at this time? Is there anybody, or should we just go ahead department by department?
Yeah, if you can let, finance director is going to go through a high level of all the departments, and again, if you can hold your questions until the end, we'll wrap up, and then you can have your questions, and then public comment, or however you kind of want to do that at that point.
I just don't know if this is a lot to digest, and I don't know if the public would like to ask questions, because it's the first time probably they're seeing these numbers in the slide presentation.
It's your pleasure, Mayor.
Okay, let's just do that, and then we can go through and start rolling through the departments. But do we have any comments at this time, either on our Zoom platform or by email? I know that there's a lot of, but let's take a moment and just make sure, in case there's some other confusion or questions, that we can, Director Chung can eliminate at this time or address at this time. Thank you.
Currently, no email comments, and there is no one asking to participate on Zoom right now.
All right, so seeing that at this time, I think we'll go ahead. Thank you very much. Just for the moment, I wanted to make sure, because it's new information and we had an active discussion, and please proceed. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. So the next phase of my presentation, I'm just going to go through the various departments listed here, and then the last item, the community services, is going to be next week. So I'm going to jump right in. The City Council's budget is anticipated to increase $15,000 or 56%. And that it's really driven by two items. It's a $5,000 item, discretionary spending, that was requested by the Vice Mayor. And also there's a $10,000 increase due to a commissioner's dinner event to honor and thank the commissioners, and that was a request by the mayor as well. On the city attorney, we're proposing a $53,700 increase, which is a 33.9% increase, and that's driven by a $27,000 increase in legal service litigation and $56,000 in legal services for municipal services. On the city manager's budget, we're anticipating a decrease of $42,000 or 5%. And this is really an increase but an offset. So let me cover the $75,000 increase, and that's the Chinese translation for priority initiative that the council had directed. $10,000 was actually moved into the city manager's budget for coyote mitigation, and that really was a transfer from the planning and buildings division or department's budget. But then that is offset by a $103,000 decrease, being that we are not going to have an election next year. And then a $30,000 decrease as well, because that was a one-time money for the recreation assessment that's completed this year. Moving on to the old mill, there is no change, but it did increase from 1819 to 1920 by $1,000 to $56,000, and that was really driven by, I'm sorry, I gotta go to the next slide. It was driven by, we required to have insurance, so that increased the cost by $1,000. So Moving forward, it's $56,000. For the finance department, we are really in line with our budget next year. And it's CPI increases throughout, but main items are the bank trustee fees. There's going to be an actuarial study that needs to be conducted next year, being that they're going to look into the CalPERS impacts for the next 2 years. And I want to have that ready, available for next year's budget, because that's going to have, hopefully not a huge impact, but I do want to make sure I understand that fully. And also, that is offset by the cost allocation and fee study that's going to be completed this year. And most likely, early July, maybe August, August is, we're not going to meet. So July, I'll bring it to council in regards to the outcome of the fee study and the cost allocation plan. For non-departmental, we are decreasing by $340,000, and that main decrease is the debt service as we discussed earlier. But we take out the debt service and we just focus on the service and supplies, it's decreasing by $8,000. And the reason for that is we're increasing about $10,000 in contractual or CPI increases, and that's driven by our IT, our third-party IT contract, some telecommunications, and then property tax admin fee, which is set by the county. And the $12,000 increase to COVID-19, and I just want to emphasize that I only put in 6 months worth of budget. I've reached out to the various department heads to get an idea of what the COVID budget should be established at. And I cut that to 6 months just to be prudent, to make sure that, I'm hoping that we'll be out of COVID by sooner than later, but I thought that would be a prudent way to budget. And a decrease of $30,000, and that's really the school district parking lot lease, being that in 1920 we did pay a back payment, but moving forward it's only going to be one payment a year. And then moving on to human resources. The budget is actually decreasing next year, and on their supplies and services supplies, and it's going to increase by $8,000 due to ongoing applicant tracking software. But the overall decreases are the $60,000 one-time budget that was this year for the FSLA audit, another $26,000 decrease because that was a one-time expense or budget for an executive recruitment, and then another decrease of $43,000 due to workers' comp insurance and general liability. And we reached out to JPIA and they provided us a decrease in premiums, which is a good sign. Moving on to planning and building. On their supplies and the total budget is increasing $49,000 or 3.1%. Mainly driven in their supplies and services supplies. They're increasing $15,000 for the proposed continuation of the current year's pilot, the facade improvement program, and also a $19,000 increase due to code enforcement prosecution activities. Moving on to parks and public works. Their budget is proposed to increase $162,000 or 4.7%. And it's mainly driven by the services and supply, emphasizing services and supplies. There's a request for $60,000 increase, and that's really driven by the water division requesting for additional budget for the water increases in water usage, and a $6,000 increase for contractually obligated CPI increases for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, reporting. For fire department, their budget is increasing $228,000, but we focus on the services and supplies. They're requesting a $9,000 increase, mostly in the lifespan and auto pulse resuscitation device, and also some various CPI increases. And also a $7,000 increase in CPI for direct contract phone lines and for the Verdugo dispatch center. The emergency services division, their overall budget is increasing $5,000. In their services and supplies, you're seeing a $3,500 increase, $3,500 increase in preparation of the updated EOC plan to include the local hazard mitigation plan, and also a $1,200 increase due to CPI increases to the AT&T phone service. Last department I have for you is the police department, and their overall budget is increasing by $297,000 or 4%. And if we focus in on the service and supplies, there's various items, but there's the $113,000 patrol car lease, which the council is going to have an opportunity to discuss and see if they want to move that out of operating and put it into capital to purchase the vehicles. There's $8,000 increase for uniforms for the motorcycle officer program, which was a priority initiative. I also wanted to go back up to the personnel. There's also, on the personnel side, beyond the contractual agreement increases, there's a $7,000 increase to hazard pay, and that's also due to the priority initiative for the motorcycle enforcement. Let me drop back down to service and supplies. $31,000 increase due to Pasadena Humane Society. And those are offset by a decrease of $93,000 due to the completion of the Motorola radio equipment, which was funded by the Homeland Security Grant. A $46,000 decrease in cost savings for the Mark 43 agreement. And lastly, another $43,000 decrease, being that the Neighborhood Watch Priority Initiative has been complete this year and is not moving into next year. That concludes my department budget overview, and I'll turn it back to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Finance Director. Just a couple of final points to make. I just want to reiterate what the Finance Director said in the police budget about those vehicles. At your CIP meeting, you approved the purchase of the patrol cars, and that would leave it in the CIP, but you also asked us to look into a lease option. So we did that, and in case you like the lease option better, we've embedded it into the proposal for the operating budget today. We are not necessarily recommending that you go the lease route. We're not necessarily recommending either thing. It really is your preference. The dollars in the end come out to about the same. It really is not a financial difference. So if you elect to not lease and go with the purchase, then it will remain in the CIP as you originally approved. If you decide to go with the lease, then we have this amount for you here and we'll pull it out of the capital. So that's really your philosophical decision to make today. I want to highlight that the Vice Mayor and the Finance Director have pointed out that personnel really is the significant expense of driving us, and the Mayor pointed that out as well, actually. Many of you are mentioning that, and it's so true. And so I just want to let you all know, point blank, there are no changes to personnel in this budget that we are recommending, with the exception of the pay and police that's related to your priority initiative. That's the motorcycle program for traffic safety. Otherwise, any increase that you see in here is a contractually obligated increase that has already gone into effect and already been agreed to. So if it brings you any comfort to know, there's nothing that we've added in here that we're proposing to you to increase on the personnel side, which is why all of the Finance Director's discussion has focused in on services and supplies. Speaking of services and supplies, the majority of those expenditures are also contractually obligated. Many of our contract services are going up. The supplies that we need have increases in those prices, and so those aren't recommendations per se to spend more money. That's just a realization in the difference in the cost of doing business. With that, my suggestion to you, Mayor, although of course it is at your pleasure how you do this, is you might want to break for public comment now so that the public could make whatever comments that they wanted up front. And then once we heard public comment, then my recommendation would be that you go through each department. Okay, City Council budget, does anybody have questions or changes that you'd like to see? And then City Attorney budget, any questions or comments? And then City Manager budget and so forth. Once we are there, if there are any changes, just a heads up, we'll be looking for a straw poll to be sure that we reflect what a majority of the council is looking for. And with that, I am happy to turn it back over to you, Mayor, and the Finance Director, of course, is happily available for questions, as are the rest of us.
All right, thank you very much. So you were saying open it up to public comment now on everything. All right, we can start with that. Do we have any, just so give people a minute,
You could, Mayor, you could even call 5-minute recess if you wanted people to pull their questions together, whatever you would like.
Why don't we take a quick break at this time, and then if the public can look through their notes, sorry, I'm getting an echo, look through their notes or concerns that they maybe want to bring up, so we could take them and put them by department, and then we can include them when the council proceeds department by department. That would be helpful. So let's take 5 and allow people at home and here to take a break and organize their thoughts for this next phase. Thank you. Still there or sign back in after a break?
All right, Mayor, so if you wanted to ask for public comment now, you're certainly welcome to. And if you want to go through each department, we are ready.
Great, thank you. First, we'll ask for public comment as we discussed and see if there's anybody online who has comments specific to the individual departments at this time that we should take into our considerations as we move through this as a council. So I would appreciate if you let us know whether there are Zoom comments and we can take those in order.
Looking first at emails, we do not have any new emails. We do not have anything in our Zoom chat. And we do not have anyone with a raised hand in Zoom. So currently there are no pending comments for you.
And just to clarify, because I don't see, perhaps I didn't notice it in the piles on the desk, did we have any email comments at all that came in other than from council members with questions that I believe have all been answered? I didn't know if you had any email contact as well from the community about some of the before today.
We have not received any comments for the budget item.
Thank you very much. All right, so if we just can keep an eye on that, but we'll proceed with going through these. The first item then is City Council. I believe, is that correct?
Correct. So just as a formatting thing, so that you know, obviously you've had a chance to look through all of this, so you probably are familiar with it. Just in case the public doesn't know, it starts off with a narrative about each department. So the City Council narrative is on the first page. Then if it's an operating department, there are also accomplishments from this year, objectives for next year, and operating metrics as well before it moves into the numbers.
Thank you, and I just wanted to, first of all, thank the work on this and answering my questions in particular about membership and dues, but also I am more than willing at this time, especially given that this is the COVID, to withdraw my request as mayor to spend that amount in next year's budget for the commissioners and committee. I would like to see us have some sort of recognition event in the future so we could really thank those members of our community that volunteer tirelessly month after month on our planning commission, DRC, public safety, library board, etc. And I think that they do so much for our community. I'm sorry if I forgot one. But at this time, I think it might be premature since we're probably not going to be able to host a nice celebration to thank them. And so I would be happy to withdraw that from this budget item so we don't have to spend time on it. And I would like to bring it back at some future date when we're operating under a new but able to socially gather normal. Because I think it's important, and many cities do take the time to do that. So it would be nice to thank ours. And maybe we can just bring back some of the commissioners who have to go off this year because of term limits and things like that. And we'll just make sure to include them in whatever future event we may have.
So unless there's objection, since this was the mayor's request initially, that would reset that line item back to $2,000.
Thank you. And in my rationale, asking for the 5,000 is we are doing volunteer positions and we get our arms twisted by different organizations in town to do advertisements. And I think we're one of the few councils that aren't getting paid. So that was, my rationale. And I'm not emotional about it. It just annoys me when I get forced to write a check.
With respect to that issue, I understand the sentiment, but I don't believe we could do it under the code. Our code says members of the city council shall serve without compensation, but may be reimbursed for reasonable expenses necessarily incurred in the performance of official duties, subject to the approval of the city council. So it can't be $1,000. You can spend it where it was, but if you have a specific request, you could bring it in and have it approved. So it's the discretionary element.
Then maybe a way to scratch that itch would be to figure out what money the auto show and Chinese club, different people look to us for and budget that amount and then pay for those ads from the city's perspective, that we support those organizations and not from the council members.
And that's possible, but what you'd have to do, you'd have to identify the specific one and then have that basically pre-approved from that, but.
Or you can say, shut up, Ken, and just write it down.
Yeah.
If I might.
I didn't want to go there because I know you work so hard on it.
If I might, if you elect not to tell the vice mayor to just pull out his checkbook and write his own check, it is customary in most cities to have a line item for city council expenses in general. The ads, your attendance at certain community events, if there's a ticket required, are all very appropriate expenses to be charged to the city. Historically, you have elected not to do that, but there's no legal reason why we couldn't make those city expenses. Now, if you want to bring your spouses, that would be a personal expense, that sort of thing. And you could, based on the vice mayor's request, we had set it up as $1,000 per council member, but there's no magic to that. It could just be a $5,000 amount. And as the city participates in things, we draw down that amount. Or you just tell the vice mayor to pull out his checkbook.
Well, and it's STEPHEN if you'd like to make a check. I'm very concerned about this, but I understand the sentiment. I just think that traditionally it's one of the costs of being a volunteer. If it is things where the city council as a whole have been asked to do an ad, I can see that. But without some definition beforehand, I disagree. I do believe it would not be allowed under our code. And so if we want to come back and put a placeholder in the budget right now and see whether or not that is those type of expenses can be approved, that's fine. But I would not, and then we could have the full discussion based upon what the expenses are. But the way I read the code, which isn't necessarily always correct, we could not just put a $1,000 discretionary expenditure on behalf of each of us, or $5,000 in general discretionary. We would have to have everything either pre-approved or approved afterwards.
I agree with Councilmember Taltz, and I had concerns in this regard because to have individual discretion is different than a council decision, which is what's provided by the code for us to do. For example, if all 5 of us take out an ad to congratulate a school or a group, then that is a city council decision and should be made as such. But then to have any one of us support a separate organization which this sounds like it is, by having it as $1,000 per person and be discretionary, then I think we run into significant amount of problems, and I think we need to be very careful and conscious at this time. So I would either remove it or greatly reduce it for the few occasions when we want to congratulate community organizations as a whole.
Yeah, and again, my intent was not to make it discretionary to what our individual opinions were. My intent was to cover the cost of the ads we are asked to place in, like the Auto Classic and Chinese Club, and if there are a couple others that come, so it's really
The schools.
May I ask a question?
Advertising expense.
Yes, Councilmember Jacobowski.
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment and ask a question. I think I'm understanding both sides of this, and as you know, we are in LA County governed by 5 supervisors, each with a district. And for similar types of purposes, and I suspect it's gone up since I've last followed it, each one of them has $1 million in a fund each year to use in their respective communities for anything that is appropriate and that would certainly pass muster if it were tested. So I understand the purpose of this, so perhaps we might consider a compromise where we would all be expected to support something and do that as a council line item. But I would also like to hear our city attorney weighs in on this. Is she available?
Yeah.
I believe at this time, we're going to try to see if we could get her, or if not, I also...
I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
Sorry, I took a minute to unmute. I agree with Councilmember Talt's position. I believe the municipal code does constrain this type of expenditure the way that it's currently written. Also, any expenditure that occurs has to be for the benefit of the city, not necessarily for the benefit of another organization. So I do think that having these things be approved by the council as they come up and be able to demonstrate what the benefit to the city is legally required.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lynch. Councilmember Wong, I also wanted to make sure that you were brought into the discussion and see, sorry about that, see if you had any questions or comments to share with us about
Well, I
this
mean, I feel
particular
the
line.
same way, you know, with Vice Mayor. I hate writing that check too. And perhaps we should reject all the application in the future, whenever they request that we make a donation. Because I see it that when Judy Chu, has a page in the Chinese club directory or the yearbook, I don't think she pays for that. So I think, maybe in the future we should just tell them, hey, we don't get paid. And maybe if they want, they can put it in the ad for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that comment, and that's an interesting point. I did not know that about Representative Chu, but that's probably happens a great deal. So it will be up to the group and to decide what to do. That's a good point. Do we have any action by Vice Mayor Udi, or do you want to?
So I would just say my read of the straw poll is that this $5,000 is being eliminated. So that item will simply be removed from the budget, since it was an account number that doesn't exist yet.
That will be
And
easy.
then maybe when they make a request in the future, just tell them no.
But no, I'm going to
mean-
let you tell them no.
They'll come after you, okay? We'll just refer them to you to be the naysayer.
Talk
All
to
right.
our black hat over there.
We got a dark cloud. Okay, city attorney, if we want to go in order. Next, we had the city attorney budget. Do we have any questions or concerns about
I
that?
have a question. Last year, we had the labor negotiations, so not having that next year, I thought this would go down.
So I know Senior Counsel Lynch is available to answer questions related to Richards, Watson, Gershon, but the labor negotiator was not in this account.
Yeah.
The labor negotiation was in Human Resources.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by council members? Yes,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobowski.
If we could please ask our city attorney the specifics of the proposed $56,000 that looks like it hasn't been spent this year, but is estimated and would be again repeated next year.
Thank you. I also had the same question because it does read I'm assuming that means additional municipal services, and so I would like an explanation since that's a new and significant sum. Can we have City Attorney Lynch please come back on when you can arrange it through Zoom?
I think I'm on. Just to give a little bit of context, under our existing agreement, we were allowed to, there was a CPI increase for the general services part of the budget, the $11,000 monthly retainer. We advised the city manager that we did not wish to take that increase because of the COVID impact on the city, not only the city budget, but other city budgets for cities that we represent. So I just wanted to put that in context. There have been additional expenditures that were related to the COVID-19 pandemic that we billed for this current fiscal year that we're in. We budgeted some amount for the forthcoming budget. Hopefully, if opening goes as anticipated and there's not a second wave, and then there are not legal issues that relate to that, that item would not, those funds would not necessarily need to be expended. And then, of course, always one area that's difficult to predict is with litigation. I'm happy to say that most of the cases have been resolved. There are 2 cases that are pending. Petitions for review have been filed with the California Supreme Court, one by Ms. Donnelly. We have not heard back on that one yet. The second by Mr. Coe. We also haven't heard back on that. But just to finish out the picture on that case, there was a trial setting conference that had been scheduled in the Coe matter. He continues to challenge the original basis for the imposition of the public safety tax and how that tax was calculated, which I believe, if memory serves, started back in 1980. So that issue is still pending. The court has put off the trial setting conference until August, but there will be a trial in that matter, a judge trial in that matter sometime probably towards the end of this coming fiscal year. So that's kind of the overall topic and prediction.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, because there was a lot to unpack there, and I appreciate the updates as well about the increase related to the increase in the litigation costs because of those 2 pending and active suits. However, the additional municipal services is purely because it is a new line item that we're adding with the anticipated cost this year of from your office of $56,700. That is all related to COVID and potential costs that are additional during this particular time, or does that include other things as well? I was unclear.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I should have been more clear. It was partially related to COVID. It could include other special services that might come up. I perhaps budgeted a little, my estimate may have been a little bit high, but we were trying to make sure that there was at least money budgeted in case there were other items that did come up of which we're not aware.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions? Councilmember Wong to the city attorney at this time,
No, I don't have any
especially if she's
questions.
online.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tall, did you have any concerns in this particular discussion?
Yes, what would be in line item contract legal services, additional municipal services, if you were to estimate the COVID only legal expenses, what would they be?
I would hope that they would be no more than, for example, 20 or 25,000. But again, that number hopefully will go down because if reopening occurs successfully, then there really won't be any other issues. Some cities, for example, have, this is just an issue that we've been dealing with currently. Some cities are trying to push, for example, using public rights of way for reopenings of businesses. San Marino has not made that type of request, but that's just an idea of something that could come up in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Udi, did you have any questions for our city attorney?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lynch. I appreciate the update and the information. This is helpful to our discussion. I'm going to return this to council as to whether we want to go with the figure and the estimation for the additional municipal services or whether that line item might be reduced at this time, and then we would, of course, approve. But
Yeah, I would like to request that it be changed to a legal services COVID-19 and drop it down to $25,000.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or discussion about that item?
Could I ask for clarification, please? Councilman Talt, so you're saying the 25 for the COVID and then a separate breakout for the remaining potential legal services?
No, I would
lawsuits?
change that to, I would drop it, make it only for COVID-19 and have it not be 56,700, but be 25,000.
So-
That's the estimate, the high end of the estimate that I heard with respect to it. I don't want to budget for some nefarious uncertainties that may never happen, and if they do, we could deal with it at the time, but let's deal with a specific crisis, and that is the COVID-19, and I do appreciate that we've had additional legal expenses as a result, and that we may have them in the future, so let's focus on the COVID-19 and this new line item and have it be $25,000.
And then the two still standing lawsuits, address those as we come to them.
That is correct. I realize that those are litigation estimates, but one will result in a trial, the other one will result in a denial by the Supreme Court, and that will end. So I'm hoping that those litigation expenses relating to those two lawsuits will not take the entire amount. But we review their bills as they come in, so I appreciate that we're very careful with respect to those litigation costs as our city attorney. So I don't perceive it to be 134,000, but you never know what the Supreme Court might do.
Appreciate the rationale, thank you.
I also, anybody else on this item? I also appreciate that, and changing it to COVID related may increase our ability to recover funds. Should that be something that other cities and put forward? Should we have to call on our attorney? And I wanted to thank Ms. Lynch also for keeping an eye on the bills, and the Richard Watson Gershon to not have the raises for cities and municipalities of their fees this year. That's much appreciated, and I know the general community appreciates that, because we still are in very uncertain times, and so financially we need to be conservative of all of our resources. So I take it that there's a majority of council right now who would like to accept Councilmember Talt's revisions, and we'll work that in, the change into the budget.
All right, so that will make the bottom line item contract legal services -COVID-19 related, and that budget amount, obviously, it doesn't change the estimated amount, but it would change the proposed amount down to 25,000.
Correct, thank you.
And the overall
Which then?
expenditures related thereto.
All right, next we have the city manager's office budget. Do we have any questions regarding that? I will start with Councilmember Wong.
No, I don't have any question.
Councilmember Jacobowski.
None, thank you.
Councilmember Talt.
No, they were all explained to me at the time.
Vice Mayor Udi.
No questions, thank you.
And I also had some questions concerning that city manager's contingency. We had, I along with some other things, and I think I had a discussion and questions answered by our city manager about that. So I'm assuming that we will go with what is in the published proposal. All right, then, thank you very much for handling our questions about some of the items, and I appreciate your input. We have El Molino Viejo, the old mill, next. Do we have any questions? Those are pretty much a set amount, but were there any concerns that we need to discuss now at this time? I don't see none. We'll move on to the finance department. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about the budget items listed in the finance department?
No.
Seeing none, move forward, I guess, to non-departmental. Do we have any questions or concerns? I just had one thing I'd like the city manager to explain about the cell phone contract services. I believe we had a little dialogue about that, and an understanding that this covers tech allowances that previously, 2 years ago, and that the costs have gone up because of the service contracts have gone up.
Yes,
Is that
thank
my
you, Mayor.
understanding?
So we all remember the evening several years ago where the decision was made by the council to move from issuing employees a technology allowance to actually providing them with city phones. I don't have the number at my fingertips now, but it was a significant amount of money that we were paying in total to employees. And it actually was going to be significantly cheaper to just provide them with phones. That was an item that you all very much wanted to keep your eyes on and be sure that it didn't grow extensively. And since that time, there are two separate things that have happened. We have indeed added some cell phones. These cell phones that we have added are a direct result of the Public Works work order app that you were excited to approve. The whole point of the app is that it works on mobile technology, so the only way to use it is for those employees to have the technology to use it. But the significant driver of the cost really is just the increases each year, the contractual CPI increases, which is, I think, what the mayor was referring to.
I appreciate that, because we are keeping an eye on it.
I know you are.
And anything more than like a 10% jump made me definitely want more explanation. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the that those additional cell phones are needed in helping with staff manage their workload and report in. So it's a good question to have, and look at that number and make sure that it was part of that. Thank you so much. Other than that, are we in a consensus that it'll move forward as stated? Seeing everybody nod, I think we're good. Next we have Human Resources Department. Did we have any questions or concerns with this?
I just have a comment. They are so rare to see workman's comp go down, so congratulations.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or concerns? And I'm looking as well, we have not had any public hand raising or email comments as we've been proceeding, or please let me know.
And also with human resources, if we are not going to have to recruit a finance director for next year, that means Paul's committed?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
It probably
We are
depends on
very
the outcome of this meeting and next week's
Thankful to
meeting.
have them. Appreciate that. Thank you for pointing that out. Do we have, next we have Planning and Building Department. I know that we don't have Director Cervantes with us today, but I think he's available by Zoom. Happy
I'm here.
for.
We hear him.
I hear you. There you are. Thank you, Director Cervantes. I really appreciate that. There were some questions that I had in this department, but they've been answered by, and I'm sure other people have as well, but if there are other council members that'd like to raise some of these budget items, we can do so at this time. Councilmember Jacobowski?
Yes, I simply have a point of order, and it isn't on a line item with the budget, but as many of us who attended City Club by Zoom last night saw, Director Cervantes has really expanded beyond his role of Planning and Building Director with our program of economic development. And I would like to suggest that we propose a title change for his position. Sorry, Aldo, no fiscal impact, but if we could move it to Community Development Director, I think it would be more fitting for the work that Mr. Cervantes is currently doing.
Thank you very much. And
Second.
we have a second. Wonderful. Councilmember Wong seconds. Since it's not a finance, but it is a title change and a very important, I would like to have a roll call vote. And congratulate.
Before we
Sorry?
do that, I would like an opportunity to discuss this.
Absolutely.
I am in favor of this, however, I think it should be done through a properly noticed meeting and not through just a motion from the floor at a meeting. It is something that I think the public should have an opportunity for input, although maybe they don't have a right to it, given that it's merely a title change. I nonetheless think that this should be done through an appropriately noticed meeting.
If it's helpful, you could elect to give me direction today to put it into the budget, and then when we bring you back the budget for adoption on June 26th, we could call it out in the staff report.
But if it's not a fiscal, why would it be part of the budget?
We would be making the change in the budget document. We have made classification title changes during the budget before. It just usually also has a salary impact. But it could be done during the budget process, and that would give the public an opportunity to come to the June 26th meeting, and then there would be no official vote today.
The way we've done it in the past is, it's been something that's been documented before, even if it's part of the budget process. This is not something that was recommended and addressed to the public as part of this meeting. So that would be fine. I just think that it should be done through the proper processes.
I'm fine in supporting it through the budget process, as you suggested, Dr. Marlowe.
I believe, though, that Councilmember Talt would like it to be a separately agendized item so that the public is aware. And then, am I hearing that correctly?
The way these things have been handled in the past is that as part of the budget recommendations, the city manager has come forward with the proposition. And so it's part of the budget process, but it's part of what the public are put on alert to by being part of a package. So any way we can get to the public is fine. It doesn't have to be independent, but just so people would have an opportunity to discuss it if they so wish.
We have historically, when the budget presentations come, have had separate items for classification changes with job descriptions that you've approved, so we can mirror that process this year on June 26th.
And that would be fine, because then at least the public would have, it would be part of what we put up online, and people have an opportunity to take a look at it.
No, I appreciate your point, and I think that's important for the public, because it is a change, and it also will deal with additional responsibilities that will divide his time further, and so I think people should be aware of that, and I appreciate that. So can we do that then in advance of then it would be the June final meeting, and we'll make sure that that's specifically drawn out for the public to see, and I appreciate that Mr. Director Cervantes will have something to say and hopefully be here then, and that will be a nice addition and further clarification for our community should there be questions. There any other?
Well, there's been a motion made and seconded. I objected just for the opportunity. Maybe we have to withdraw that motion.
Thank you. Do you want to withdraw your motion at this time, and then or would you like to have a vote on it?
If I might, I would just suggest procedurally, you might as well withdraw it. You're still going to be doing final budget adoption on the 26th.
That's fine.
An official motion at that point.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So the motion is withdrawn, and we will go about it in discussion in a different way at our end of the final budget meeting. Do we have any other questions? Council Member Wong for regarding the planning and building department budget?
No, thank you.
Council Member Talt?
I have no further questions.
Vice Mayor Udi?
No questions, thank you.
I had a question, and I just because the number is quite large and still growing, I wanted an explanation on the record from Director Cervantes so the community knows where we are in regard to the item that's at the end of page 20 in the packet about other contract services, just so we understand where we are with regard to the historic citywide survey. If you would spend a moment and where we are in budgeting for that and its completion.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate the conversation that we just had. I'm grateful, and so we'll push that till next time. But to answer the specific question, ARG, which is our contract vendor in responsibility for our citywide historic survey, is essentially about 99% complete with the project. We have just about $1,000 left over in expenditures for that contract, and that we're looking to carry over. Likely, we'll get the bill soon past the fiscal year, and we'll sort of pay that with what we have in there. And so soon after that, we'll be approaching the council, hopefully in the fall, to present the findings of the report. But we are at the tail end of that contract, and it should be expended completely, and the project should be completed in the fall.
All right, and the increase in this category, can you let us know what that had involves or what the amount is?
Yes, so the contract for ARG was a large fund of $165,000 that started several years ago. It has been drawn down over the years, and we've carried over some of the funds that were still left over in the contract. In addition to that, we've looked at maintaining a few other of the expenditures, i.e. the software expenditures. We're maintaining the tree incentive program that's being moved over to the next fiscal year, including the economic development program. What we're looking to add for this coming fiscal year is with respect to separating out the facade improvement program out of the economic development program. As you all recall, the facade improvement program was or is a pilot program at the moment. I was confident in being able to use the funds inside the economic development program fund to pay for that one case if one did come before us. But with the next fiscal year coming on us, I request that we separate that fund into a separate line item. That way we can sort of spark the facade program in the next fiscal year. And of course, with $50,000 as requested, we're looking to at least funding about 5 projects. In addition to that, another $50,000 is being requested for the housing element. And that's really mainly a placeholder to look for contracting out a vendor to assist the city in putting that document together. It is a very thorough document. We do it every 8 years, and it's coming up fairly shortly next year in April, where we have to submit the document. And because of the significant amount of legislation out there with respect to housing law, we as staff really need the help of a consultant guide us through that program.
Thank you, that's very helpful, because part of my concern was that we do have costs, for example, the money for the facade improvement, and that is an economic development that's different, for example, than housing elements or the historic resource survey, and it gets hard to see the line item increase without an explanation. So I don't know, since it's a priority initiative, whether things like facade improvements for our commercial zones are part of that community economic development and might be better captured there. That was my only concern, since it is a significant amount. And when I saw this, I would think, since we have paid our ongoing payments for the historic resource survey, however, this category that captures that in total is still going up, and it looks strange because it's including this new 50,000 that you just remarked about for a potential facade improvement, as well as a continuation of many other things. So I just think it's hard without this being broken down, and to me it seems like economic development monies, whether it's facades or other things that we decide to do for the capital improvement project, or no, what would it be called? Priority initiative, that we should be grouping those in their own category for budgeting if they have to do with economic development. And so that was my concern with just putting it in this, because we have not a lot of way, except if we want to really dig into the weeds, like I am right now, to understand how many local businesses are taking advantage of what parts, and I think we do need to monitor that for future budgeting in a way that it doesn't get lumped together. But I may be one of 5, obviously, that feels that way, but I think the more detail, particularly in these new programs, it would be nice to have a line item, and I don't know if that's possible to do, or it makes it more complicated.
So as it relates to the structure of the budget, at this point, of all the budgets that you're seeing today, the only budget that is divided up into programmatic areas is the Parks and Public Works budget. The planning and building budget probably mostly because it's just been planning and building up until this point, as Councilmember Jacobowski pointed out earlier, has always been one budget. So there is no separate place where the program areas would be called out separately. As the department is growing and having different functions, it's possible that we could have a conversation over the next year of spreading it out into different programs, but that's not a quick fix. So we can take your comment under advisement and think about it for next year.
Yeah, it would make sense to me too, because economic development is new, we need to put a spotlight on it somewhere and somehow. Now, it could be a schedule within this line item or a separate line item itself.
Right, I would also agree. It's just, I would like the community and people to know that, and particularly because we are planning to make this a more, with Director Sponte's assistance and staff, a more robust program. And so I really want to know how much is being spent. My first thought was just to make another line item for this coming year to separate out, for example, what was just detailed. Since we already have quite a few under planning and building, I guess in my mind that would be doable. And then future, if it does become a standalone kind of situation, obviously it will change and we could pull everything out. But I was just thinking really for these type of expenses like facade improvements and things like that, the signage, I would like to see an amount there and then see how we spend it for this coming, within the present framework that I'm looking at, but just not put everything under other contract services. Because that doesn't help the public really understand. It didn't help me. So I'll speak for myself.
If it's a direction from the council, yes, creating an extra line item so that we can track that and it's more visible, definitely we can do that for you.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a problem.
Did anybody else on council would be like to go with that and pull out those costs at this time? If it's doable for Director Chung for the final, and then we could think about it for ongoing as to how to treat it?
That's fine. When we had our meetings prior to today, we discussed with Director Chung the whole issue of other contract services. We were running into some large numbers there, and when we spelled them out in simplistic terms like Chinese translation, it removes all questions. So I think this is a goal we're working toward anyway, but if we can do it simply this first year, because we really don't have a full handle on how this is going to roll out, and then something more complex after this year, that would be appreciated.
Thank you very much. All right, I think it's a direction of Councilmember Wong,
Yes.
Councilmember Tall. Is
Yes.
that agreeable? And Vice Mayor Udi as
Yes,
well?
please.
All right, so that was,
So when you see the budget then on June 26th, there'll be a new line item that says other contract services dash economic development. And all the things that were in this line item that are related to that will pull out and go into that one. So you'll see a reduction in this line item and a new line item that'll have the monies in it.
all right, and it's just like the next one that does appear at the top of the next page, other contract services IT. So I understand that one. But that would be very helpful. And I think it would benefit the community. Thank you. Next, we have Parks and Public Works Department. Sorry, catching up here. Do we have any questions or comments from anybody on council?
Yeah, I find the operating metrics to be very helpful in reviewing this, so thank you.
I do have a question.
Please.
I've gone back and taken a look at it, they tried to explain it to me. But the increase, the increase in, what's the word I'm looking for, in personnel of $100,000, part of this was explained to me by, there's someone that's in the streets that's moving to grounds, but that should be a net zero. Is all of the 100,000 increases in the MOU and our other benefis packages? It just seems odd to me because it's the highest increase without adding people. How has this happened?
You know, Councilmember, I'm calculating it now, but there was no additional FTE added, so there should be no increases due to additional FTE. It's really contract driven, and I'm just calculating that right now just to get a percentage, but it should be close to, I believe, 5%.
Well, it's 5.3% if I take a look at the personnel costs. $95,000 change. That is, how much of that is full-time salary? How much of that is benefits? Because when we went through the MOU, when we made these changes, it didn't seem to me like we would have any of these increases that are showing up under the public Parks and Public Work. It wasn't what we were being told. So I'm a little confused. Maybe I forgot something that happened, but I'm just uncertain as to this substantial increase in personnel costs, unless they're driven by per CalPERS and other benefit costs.
They are contractually increased due to the MOU and the CalPERS increases.
Okay, and then one of the problems is when I look at other departments, I'm able to see the operating budget detail immediately so that I can make that conclusion. And I see that but we don't have that for the department as a whole.
So the problem is the same summary page that I was speaking of before. This is the only department that you're seeing today that has the different divisions. So while there's the overall page on 24 of 45, it only includes a very high level total summary. It doesn't then, because if you go to page 25, now you're in a division. It's not total.
Right, and that's why. So could someone break that out for me where I can see that the personnel costs?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Well, can I also make a point here? There is expenditures by division at the end of the page that deals with these increases. And I also had to get out a calculator to figure out that there was a $166,000 change. Part of it accounted for, or jump, 161 I believe it is. Part of it had to do with that personnel who were moved, or a person, from streets to grounds. So obviously those two numbers shifted, I think that was. But to me, that's only accounting for a small change because streets only went down by, let's say, 60,000, but grounds went up more significantly by over 100,000. So I'm still confused, even if you switch a person, why that category in personnel in particular went up higher than the other departments. Like Councilmember Talt said, with the MOU cost, we can kind of see the trend. And this one, even with the explanation now that I know that there was a personnel shift, I think it still financially is a question, poses a question. If we're keeping staff in the same.
What you're missing in front of you that would probably be helpful, which Finance Director and I have agreed we can get to you, is a version of, if you look at page 25, kind of in the middle of the page where it says operating budget detail, and it goes through everything from full-time salaries down to workers' comp and so forth. If you had that detail, but the total across all divisions, you could get into the question that I think some of you are asking is how much of this is salary? Is this really a PERS increase? What's happening here? But that hasn't been here historically, so we can create that for you. Not just for you, for the community. It makes sense to have a full-blown summary page there that totals everything.
I would appreciate because I shouldn't have to go through or the mayor or anybody else and make these additions.
And I just want to draw your attention to the top of page 32 because that does have the personnel line item for the grounds department, which was where the bulk of the increase, if you're setting aside water, or whatever, in this one, but it actually spells out on that very first line across, and there is 105,000 increase in that department. So part of that explains the shift of one person, but again, the rest of it I couldn't figure out, and so it would be helpful to understand because there was a drop in streets of 56,000, but it still seems off by much more than 5 or 4%, similar to our other salary or personnel changes reflecting the MOUs.
So what I'll do is I'll revise the summary sheet for the adoption for next month, a clearer summary in regards to the personnel increases for the per division, so that it'll be a lot more clear for council, and then I'll also provide additional information if there are anything beyond the regular MOU increases or the CalPERS increases that are in there.
That would be helpful
And there
because,
are not. There are not.
well, okay. It'd be helpful because this department at times becomes criticized by a certain segment of our residents. And having the opportunity to point them to something specific is extremely helpful, saves time, angst, and all of that, so I appreciate it.
For all of us, we will be happy to do
Yes.
that.
Vice Mayor, did we have, and also can you drill down on the grounds specifically?
Yeah.
That change, that's 100,000, and help me or help the public understand what went on there. Vice Mayor Udi, did you have any questions or comments at this time?
No questions, thank you.
And I have to say, I think you know I'm going to say this because I already had emailed you, but just briefly, the operating metrics, I hope that I will see better metrics about the trees being planted than removed in town. I know that you are still in the process of hopefully adding more by the end of this current year. So hopefully the end of the operating metrics will be better numbers. But we can at least equal what we did in 18-19 and not surpass that. And I'm hoping we could do that, particularly because the urban forester is now part of our program, and we have some, we've dedicated additional funds for this.
Yes, we will, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, sorry. Going next to fire department. Did we have any questions or concerns in that category that remain unaddressed or people would like to discuss? Councilmember Jacobowski?
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Wong?
No questions.
Councilmember Talt?
Yes, just one question, and this is probably a public policy question more. Do you believe that the shared overtime command is still saving the city money? The shared command, not, because I take a look at the overtime, and that was explained to me, but just, it gives a short presentation with respect to whether you believe that that is still the best practices that we could use in operating our fire department.
Yes, it still saves money, is the short answer. The best practice would actually be 3 San Marino employees at a cost of 1.5 times what we pay now. We would get 100% of our work done here in the city by San Marino employees, but that would be expensive. This is a compromise model that still works very well, primarily because South Pasadena and San Marino fire departments are nearly identical. We get along, we have nearly identical policies, and the process is working well. It's effective. This year was hampered a bit by a serious injury to one of our battalion chiefs that spiked our overtime a bit. But the short answer is yes, this model is working effectively.
Thank you.
I also had just to follow up on, I also had a concern about this, and I think you answered it in part, but is there, my thought is, because this year we are looking at a lot of overtime and that because of the injury, and it might be somewhat one-off, but we are trending toward that being a regular commitment of our city, between 40 and 55,000 that we're paying for that shared command overtime. And is there a way to avoid that by making somebody else in your department able to fill in when we are, instead of going to overtime with that particular person because of what happens in South Pass or additional work? I just don't, I understand it would be another half a position, but is there no other way that we can elevate, I don't know who would be the next person in seniority to fill that instead of going to overtime time. Do you understand what I'm saying?
It's a long explanation, but if it's sort of, even if we bumped somebody up into an acting position, the person that we bumped up, their position would need to be filled for. They can't necessarily be in two places at once. So when we first entered into the agreement with South Pasadena for shared command 3 years ago, we estimated what that overtime would look like. I think we actually came in lower a couple of the years, and this year we did spike up. This is the third year of this agreement, so we'll be coming back to council after July with a report on the effectiveness of this program. So I think it'll give a more fuller explanation of how things are working, but I can tell you that the short answer is it's working very well.
My other question was, if we have an increase in our budget for this shared command overtime, and let's, because of the circumstances, assume that South Pass is actually realizing no additional or very minimal additional overtime because they aren't covering our command. It seems like if that becomes a year in and year out, we're not possibly, but we could talk about this when the report comes out to understand both of our financial commitments to this position and how it, whether it's equal.
Yep, both cities end up sharing that burden in this case.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Do we have any other questions for, oh, I had one other question. And that had to do with the overtime strike team line item. I know that, I understand from the explanation that you wrote that it was there, the budget, it's just that we have, it's a significant amount as a budget line item, and we have never come close to using it, thank goodness. But I understand in the long run that it's money that we would be reimbursed for from state or other organizations eventually, but I just wonder, why are we keeping it at such a significantly high number?
So the 5-year trend goes from 0 and slow fire seasons to a high of 141,000. So it's highly dependent on the wildland activity and San Marino's participation in there. It's actually 110% reimbursed. They give us 10% for administrative overhead, and then they reimburse the city for 100% of our costs.
All right, thank you, that's helpful. Did anybody else, I'm sorry, I don't know where I was. Vice Mayor Udi, did you have any questions about the fire department budget? Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Chief. And I think, are you staying there if there's any questions about emergency management? I don't know that there are. Does anybody have any concern about the emergency management budget? Thank you. Thanks so much, Chief Royda. Last, miraculously, for today, we have a police department budget, and there'll probably be some questions, and I see Chief Encontro is here. So I don't know.
And Madam Mayor, we do definitely need you to address the patrol car issue.
Call me.
That
Okay.
is not my job.
Do we want to,
But we just definitely need to cover that
as part of this discussion?
at some point.
All right, so Councilmember Jacobowski, did you have any, or, well, we'll go down the line. Councilmember Jacobowski, did you have any questions at first on any of the budget or the prior operating metrics, et cetera, as presented by the police department?
No questions, and as was already shown to us, I continue to be delighted in the decrease in residential burglaries, but sorry to hear as of recent that with COVID we are now seeing an increase in commercial, correct? Thank you.
Councilmember Wong?
No, I don't have any question. Thank you.
Councilmember Tall.
What's the difference between uniforms and uniforms purgeable, and why in that increase I understand is because of the extra uniforms / equipment that are necessary for our motorcycle officers. But what's uniform purgeable? It's on 44 to 45.
I asked the same
I could
question.
take that question. So it's really, the purgeable item is really a item that we report. We want to have a dedicated item so that we can report it to CalPurge, meaning that the CalPurge, the officers, that the uniforms are purgeable so that we have a separate dedicated expenditure line to track those uniforms, and we just call it purgeable. And then there's the safety item, which those are all bulletproof vests, I believe, in areas of safety, not uniform.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second question I have is, if we end up leasing these automobiles, will our vehicle repair and maintenance costs decrease? We have it budgeted for $85,000, and I forget how much of the fleet is coming up for renewal, for lack of a better term, but did we consider that there might be decreased costs as a result of leasing vehicles because of certain warranties? And I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen the agreement.
I think the question is, what's the economic difference between leasing and purchasing?
Right.
If you're ready to discuss the whole leasing.
Let's go ahead. Yeah.
Then we'll go ahead. It's going to cost us more per vehicle over the length of the 5-year lease, to lease over purchase. It's approximately $7,000 more. There's more money. Initially, it's going to cost us about $113,000 the first year for the 5 vehicles. Over the life of the lease, it's going to cost more, slightly more.
Well, you got the financing charges.
We have financing charges. We have charges that we have to put up front. It is I'm sorry.
And then also operationally, wouldn't you have more flexibility if we purchased them than having the time ticking on a lease terminating?
That's possible. I can't predict. We assume whether we lease or buy that we will have about 15,000 miles driven on each vehicle per year. Some vehicles are driven more, some vehicles are driven less, but we pay attention to that to try and keep it even. One of the issues that we face if we purchase 6 vehicles, when we purchase 6 vehicles or obtain 6 vehicles, at the end of 5 years, approximately when they have around 100,000 miles, a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, that those 6 vehicles are going to have to be replaced all over again. The ability with a lease is perhaps we see an opportunity to turn in a vehicle prior to the year 5, so we can start a rotation as we had before, where we used to rotate and purchase 2 vehicles every year. We don't have that ability in the position we're in. We will pay more when we turn in a vehicle early on a lease, as we all know, because of the value of the vehicle, and we have to compensate for that. We wanted to look at leasing as a different option. It does cost us a little bit more, but it's just a different way of obtaining and working on our fleet. I have no preference one way or the other. If we're clearly looking at saving money per year, because up front our cost is considerably less. We get 6 cars for approximately the cost of two vehicles. Then the next year we'll have to pay, and it goes on from there. But the cost is slightly more over the last year. I think it's 37,000 or something like that, but it's more money over the 5 years of leasing the cars.
Chief, may I ask you a question about outfitting the vehicles? When you purchase, obviously you purchase whatever additional materials you want to put inside of that vehicle for use. When you lease, obviously these are add-ons. Does it affect cost in any additional way, since these are not owned by us, either with additional cost for us to get them outfitted, or at the end of the lease, removing whatever we've put in to outfit them? Can you address that topic in general?
Yes, ma'am. The equipment that we are going to place inside the vehicles, exactly the same whether we purchase or lease. We own that equipment. Some of the equipment will not last 5 years, will not be usable at the end of 5 years. We are obtaining new mobile digital computers for the cars as part of this budget. Those are computers. Computers last a certain amount of time. They may not last 5 years. We went almost 8 years and had terrible operating equipment. But we have them. One of the things that's helpful for us in equipping these vehicles is Ford Motor Company, as part of a package, includes most of the equipment as part of the vehicle itself. They have a separate package, a 500A package. And it includes everything that we would need, except for our mobile digital computers, our radios that we have that we obtain separately. But all of the, most of the other things are already in the vehicle.
So that's for the leasing or?
Leasing or buying, yes.
So I think you're getting to the question I was trying to get at. We don't incur any additional fees for, quote, altering the vehicles if we were to lease them and get them outfitted the way we need them, because most of what we need outfitted will already be in that vehicle.
That's correct, Councilman.
That helps, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question on leasing.
Please.
You said that 15,000 miles per car, right? So it's at the end of 5 years, if it's over, if you're over the mileage, then you get to pay the extra. Is that correct?
No, on the lease, there's no mileage restriction. There's no abnormal wear and tear penalties either.
No restrictions, no limitations on mileage?
Right. There's an assumption based upon review of our use of vehicles that we're driving our vehicles about 15,000 miles. And there is no penalty for more miles than 15,000.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, I was also concerned about whether at the end of a lease term, often a person comes out and measures the scratches and checks everything thoroughly inside and out. And I don't know whether commercial leases or those for police cars in particular have the same level of end of lease penalties, for lack of a better, or fees, or whether, and you just spoke to the mileage one, but I'm also concerned actually about the use that I assume our officers are out there in the field frequently. And so there's a lot of wear and tear that a normal car would go under. And so what provisions are there at the end of a lease that we need to consider that could add, perhaps with 6 cars, a financial additional amount that's significant? It could be 10% of the lease or more, I don't know. But what is built into this understanding that the lease option presents?
So at the end of the lease, the company that we're looking at is estimating that the vehicles will be worth a little bit over $10,000
Per unit.
per unit. We have the opportunity at the end of the 5-year lease to take the car. It's ours. We can continue to use it as a patrol vehicle if it is safe and running well. We can sell it ourselves. Maybe we'll get 10,000, maybe we'll get 2,000. I don't know, whatever the market will bear. Or we give it back to the leasing company. They apply a percentage of that $10,000 towards a new lease if we choose to go for a new lease. So those are the options that we have. If we keep the car and sell it ourselves and use that as a down payment for purchasing new cars for the next 5 years or the next period, we would use that money. Those are the options. So there's no real penalty. However, a vehicle that is badly worn, that is not in good shape, will definitely be much less than what we have. It just depends. These vehicles are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right, so, okay, so there's two things there, but I'm just asking, similar to the mileage, there's no mileage overage charges. Are there wear and tear overage?
There's no
wear and tear
penalties or
charges?
fees. No penalties or fees. It's based upon what the value of the vehicle in the
Yeah.
market at the time, and what we can get for the vehicle based upon its condition, just as if you were selling your own car.
All right, that's helpful, thank you.
Can are we still on?
We are, we're having an issue with the camera, so there's still audio, but.
Audio, okay.
Video.
They won't see you for a minute, Councilmember Tall, but.
It's okay. I didn't do my hair this morning.
I feel pretty strongly that we should buy these. I feel that leasing is wrong. We just heard that leasing is a little bit more expensive. I think operationally to have, 6 cars coming due at the same time reduces some of our flexibility. We've got over $30 million in the bank. And optically, I don't think we want $113,000 on the annual budget. We should just buy it through move it over to the CapEx, buy it and be done with it.
I had one question about that. In my understanding of leases, also that sometimes additional maintenance, et cetera, or if there's a problem with the car, for example, some vehicles do tend to be problematic, which we've seen in the past, even though you might buy 3 or 4 in a given year, one particular one requires much more. And so the lemon law, for lack of a better thing, is what protects California individuals when they buy their own cars, but we really haven't seen that in a lease. So if we do have 1 or 2 of these, is there a way that we can get a new car as a replacement vehicle if it ends up to be a maintenance issue that starts really mounting? And that's where you're really going to save money on a lease, is that some of those maintenance and operational expenses are then the responsibility of the company.
Minor repairs and maintenance will continue to be completed by our Public Works Department. We have a warranty for the vehicle, as anyone does when they purchase a vehicle. And that will cover for drivetrain and the normal warranty covered items. Similar to what you would do if you bought the same car.
Okay.
So same similarities. If we have a car that is a lemon, then we will certainly go to the leasing company. I can't say that they will automatically give us a car back, but they will definitely try and work with Ford to have the vehicle repaired. And but if a car is completely not serviceable, cannot be repaired, I believe we could have one replaced. We don't believe we'll incur any costs, but I'm sure there is some cost related to
Sure, mileage or whatever.
increased value in the new vehicle.
Okay.
I've got one more question, and this one is for Director Chung. How does this show up on our if we buy a car, it shows up as an asset. If we lease a car, it shows up as a liability?
No, even if we lease it, we will reflect the asset, not the whole asset itself, but actual lease payment. So if it's, I believe it's going to be $50,000 or $60,000 a year, we'll just reflect that as an asset, not the whole amount.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
And
yeah. And Councilmember Jacobowski also had a follow-up question.
Thank you. And to clarify, absolutely identical in the ongoing maintenance costs that we have in-house, correct? Any repairs, maintenance, regardless of whether we purchase or lease, is the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
All right, so any other questions? I know we went directly to this, but I had some other general questions, but let's work on resolving what the direction or thought.
I move
Counsel?
that we buy the cars.
Second.
Okay, since this is a financial decision, we'll take a roll
Have to
call,
do a roll
please.
call. Councilmember Long.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Tulloh.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Udi.
Yes.
And Mayor Shepherd-Army.
Sure, yes.
Sounds like a yes.
But thank you for investigating that, and if it had been a savings, I appreciate it. I know it took more time, but I think it's good that we considered that because it's a significant expense. So thank you for taking the time.
So then, just as a reminder, regardless of what else you talk about, when you see the budget on June 26th, you'll see a significant drop in operating expenditure for the police department as we remove this. You'll also see an overall drop in the overall expenditures because that will come out as well. So although this was certainly your decision to make in either direction, there could have been reasons for each. This will certainly make our bottom line look better on the operating side.
Well, most importantly, what's better for the police department and our community. So thank you. I'm glad you investigated this, and that's important to know. I also wanted to take a moment. I don't know if other council members had questions here. I did about the operating metrics, and I think we touched on that. The decrease in burglaries, I know everybody's very happy about, and residents as well as council members, to see and appreciate the work that's still being done and that those numbers are dropping even given the current circumstances. However, the commercial burglary recent increase, I think perhaps during COVID times, but you can inform the community otherwise, as well as the increase in auto thefts and things like that, I think is disturbing. And I just want to get some feedback because the community will obviously see this, and as well as the public, and understand the efforts that the police and you've been doing in this regard to keep these numbers, and maybe you can help us understand the changes.
Yes, thank you very much. As I explained last night in the City Club meeting, but it's good for this audience, in regards to commercial burglaries, shortly before the whole pandemic began, we were working on developing a business watch, neighborhood watch type of program. Because of the businesses being closed, with no owners, no one to keep showing up, people are going onto these properties and committing commercial burglaries. Throughout the county and throughout the nation, commercial burglaries, also auto thefts are high. They've increased. Part of our problem is we have a zero bail program throughout the state. So unless you were arrested for a residential burglary all the way to a murder, there is no bail. We will give you a ticket, we will process you at the local jail, Alhambra, and soon Pasadena, and we let you go. We have the ability on certain crimes to ask for bail enhancement from a judge. Doesn't always happen. And it would not happen in a commercial burglary. We have made arrests. We had 2 commercial burglaries last week, and I think this is important to note, with the problem that we have in trying to prevent these burglaries or to reduce them. An office building along Huntington Drive. Building is closed. There's no real access. The rear window or rear door where the access is made cannot be seen from an alleyway, can't be seen from Huntington, and that's where they made entry. And then because nothing was on, there was no burglar alarms, that they have free roam. So when it's out of sight, it's difficult to prevent it or to make an arrest. However, we are informing our business community, and as we are opening, we're working with the business community again to try and kickstart the Business Watch program and look forward to having an impact on commercial burglaries. In regards to auto thefts, we had, it's listed as 8 auto thefts. We actually had 7. One of the auto thefts occurred in Lancaster, and we made the arrest and the recovery here in town. So that reflected an initial reporting of a crime, and as we do analysis and look into the crime, sometimes the status or the number of crimes will change. Of those 7 vehicles, we recovered 3. 2 of the vehicles were unlocked, and 2 of the vehicle crimes, we actually made an arrest. So we've had an impact. We've been putting out more and more information and talking to the community and messaging about locking your car. Don't leave your keys in the car. That's been partly a problem for us, but it's not an excuse for the numbers. In my capacity as the president of Los Angeles County Police Chiefs Association, we recently did a look at crime stats from January through the end of April on what kind of crimes are occurring. Is it occurring throughout the county or at every city, or what is going on? But for every city within the county, for the most part, we've had an increase in auto thefts. The increase is approximately 41% throughout the county. There was an article I read yesterday in a Police Executive Research Forum, or PERF, email that I receive every day that mentioned that across the country, auto theft is increasing. We have problems where people leave keys in the car. We have older cars that are very easy to steal, and that generates higher numbers in auto theft. It's an easy crime to commit, and I think that's what's fueling it. The fact also that the state has released a significant number of people from prison, and also the county has too, well over 1,200, because of the issue on COVID with spreading throughout both of those institutions. So when you have more crooks out and about, when you have more opportunity, when you have less people, residents, community members who can see something and say something and let us know about suspicious people, kind of fuels the whole thing. And the fact that we don't keep anybody in detention unless it's a significant crime. The opportunity is there, and when you have something that someone else wants to steal, it's going to happen. But we do focus on this, and we're trying to do our best this time.
John, if you don't mind, I've got a question. And this happens around my house occasionally. The keyless keys are left in the car because people just forget, because you're not taking it out, put it in your pocket. Has that been potentially an explanation for the increase, or do we find that people are just negligently leaving these type of keys in?
Well, I'll use the term absent-mindedly, leaving them in their vehicles, yes. And that has occurred on a couple of our crimes.
Do you know if there's any way is there anything out there that will remind people when they close their car and walk in that they've left
it's called Mom.
Yeah. You are not able to lock your car unless you have the key fob either on your person close by. You know, some vehicles, you can touch the door handle and the door will lock or open, but you have to have the key fob with you. If you have it inside the vehicle, it may or may not, I don't know all models of cars, lock the vehicle. Or you have to manually lock it yourself. And if you don't have that fob with you, and you leave it in the car's not locked.
Are these crimes being occurred overnight or also during the day?
Generally overnight.
Okay.
Although we did have one car, an older car that was stolen in the Mission area district that was parked in the back of an alleyway, and that was stolen during the day.
Thank you.
I just wanted to raise 2 other points. One, I wanted to thank, and I apologize to Chief Rueda, but I know the community is happy that our response times have gone down, and I think that's significant, both in the police department as well as the turnout times and response times at the fire department. So I appreciate the efforts of both departments and the work that our first responders are doing to really continue to work on that. That's wonderful news, and I know a lot of people feel greater comfort in that positive progress. So thank you both, and if you would relay that. The last question or issue that I had is the traffic collision increases, and particularly those that we've seen regarding total injury traffic collisions. That was a startling operating metric for me to see, particularly because I know that your officers have done, I see them out more. I think people around town are generally behaving better, and we have had less traffic for a good 6 weeks or 8 weeks-ish. I know right now it's picking up and I see that every day, but I wonder if you might comment, is because this isn't really broken down by when. I know if we go through the police reports monthly, we can sort of understand that, but what has really happened in those two categories, and how can we protect our community better and increase public safety? Just in short, I know.
I'll try to be brief. We have seen an increase. When you looked at the statistics that are associated with the budget, there is a 30% increase in traffic injuries. Currently, we're at about 25% increase, so it has gone down. Our citations have actually increased since February. Initially, during January, February, our officers were more cautious based upon our knowledge of the virus and our availability of PPE. We were not making as many stops, and that may have contributed to the increase during the early part of the year. Since then, we have considerably increased our traffic citations, and we have seen a decrease in the number of injury traffic collisions. And we're certainly going to continue that. We are in the process of planning our town hall meeting middle of June, if everything works in conjunction with the Public Safety Commission, if we can work that out. But we also want to follow up with that, and I believe that'll help us also.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments. Any other issues, or we're good with the change, the removal of the lease item, and then taking that up as a purchase for the department? And did we have any other question or comments, or has anybody appeared online remotely just to close this matter?
We do not have any email comments, no chat comments, and no one raising their hand.
All right, do I have
We have gotten what we needed from you today. Thank you so much. Just to recap, there are some changes to the city council budget. There's some changes to the city attorney budget. We will bring back a specially called out item related to the title change from Planning and Building Director to Community Development Director. We'll pull out a line item for other contract services, economic development, give you a fuller summary page for Parks and Public Works and the personnel side, and we will remove the leasing of the vehicles from the police department budget. Thank you very much for all of your work this morning. We will look forward to seeing you next Friday at 8:30, where we will talk about the community services operating budget, which of course includes library and recreation, and then revisiting the remainder of the CIP items.
Also, I need to ask, were there any written communications or public writings distributed that we haven't discussed?
No, none that we haven't discussed.
Thank you. And any closing public comments online or here? I don't see any here.
No more public comments.
And give them a minute to raise their hands on Zoom or what have you to see if anybody would like to give public comment at this time. And while people may be doing that or attempting to do that, I wanted to also remind residents that we do have a virtual town hall regarding coyotes coming up, and you can look at the city website. It's this coming Monday night from 6 to 7 p.m. It's put on by the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, and I know that I am personally getting a lot of coyote questions from community members because, and I think that will increase with the heat and the dryness, so it's a good time to encourage residents to listen in and see what we can do as a community to haze them and hopefully protect ourselves and our pets more. Anything online?
No further comments.
Then seeing none, then I will close this meeting, and thank you very much for all of the help today. Thank you.